3 years ago, Isabella Marino disappeared into the night, pregnant with twin boys she never told their father about. The man she ran from was Luca Moretti, a crime boss whose gentle touch couldn't erase the blood on his hands. She built a new life under a new name, believing distance could keep her son safe from his world. But tonight, standing in her Portland apartment with her children asleep down the hall, she opens the door to find him waiting. He knows everything, and he's not leaving without his family. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story reaches. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan law office, blurring the city lights into watercolor streaks. Isabella Marino sat perfectly still in the leather chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Across the mahogany table, lawyers shuffled papers with the mechanical efficiency of men who'd witnessed dozens of these transactions. Because that's what this was, a transaction. A marriage certificate lay between her and the man she was about to marry. Isabella forced herself to look at him. Luca Moretti sat with the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavy. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance painting. Strong jaw, Roman nose, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her father's car, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders that didn't need the enhancement. He hadn't smiled once since she'd entered the room. "Miss Marino?" The head lawyer, Thompson, his nameplate read, slid the contract toward her. "If you'll review the terms one final time before signing." She didn't need to review them. She'd memorized every clause during the sleepless nights before this meeting. In exchange for marriage to Luca Moretti, the debt of Marco Marino, totaling $847,000 plus accumulated interest, will be considered paid in full. The marriage will be legally binding. Dissolution will require mutual consent. Mrs. Moretti will reside at the primary residence and maintain appropriate appearances at designated social functions. Appropriate appearances, as if she were a piece of furniture being moved from one showroom to another. "My father," Isabella said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The agreement guarantees his safety?" "Your father's debts will be erased," Luca said. His voice was deep, quiet, with an edge that suggested he didn't often repeat himself. "No one will touch him." "That's not what I asked." Those dark eyes fixed on her with sudden focus. "No one will touch him," he repeated, slower this time. "He'll be protected. You have my word." "Forgive me if I don't find that particularly comforting, Mr. Moretti. Your word is why my father owes you nearly $1 million. A muscle twitched in his jaw, the first break in his composure. "Your father made choices. He gambled with my money, lost, and then continued to gamble thinking he could win it back. I gave him more time than I've given anyone. The fact that he's still breathing is proof of my patience. How generous of you." "Isabella." Her father's voice cracked from where he sat against the wall, small and diminished. Marco Marino had aged a decade in the 6 months since his debt had come due. Gray stubble covered his sunken cheeks, and his hands shook constantly now. "Please, just sign it." She hated the pleading in his tone, hated that he'd put her in this position, hated that she was going to do it anyway because, despite everything, he was still her father, and she couldn't let him die. "One more question," she said, turning back to Luca. "Why marriage? You could have asked for anything else. Money I don't have, sure, but there must be other ways to settle his debt." Luca leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "I need a wife. You need your father alive. It's practical." "You need a wife?" "I need legitimacy, stability, the appearance of being settled." He said it like he was discussing stock portfolios, not a lifelong commitment. "Marriage provides that. So I'm a prop. You're a solution to a problem, as I am to yours." The brutal honesty shouldn't have been refreshing, but it was. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was, a business arrangement dressed in legal paperwork. Isabella picked up the pen. Her father exhaled audibly. The lawyers straightened, sensing the close of the deal. Luca remained motionless, watching. "Separate bedrooms," Isabella said, "already arranged. I keep my own schedule, my own friends, my own life. Within reason." Define reason, Mr. Moretti. You'll live in my home, attend functions when required, maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage in public. He paused. What you do in private is your concern. How romantic. This isn't romance, Miss Marino. This is business. She signed her name across the bottom of the marriage certificate, the scratch of pen on paper absurdly loud in the quiet room. Isabella Marino, written in her careful script. After today, it would be Isabella Moretti. The lawyers witnessed. Her father wept quietly. Luca signed without hesitation, his signature a bold slash across the page. Congratulations, Thompson said with professional cheer. You're now legally married. Isabella felt nothing. No joy, no fear, no relief, just a hollow numbness that had become familiar over the past months. We'll need photos, one of the other lawyers said, for the record. Of course they would, evidence that this was real, that the arrangement was legitimate. Isabella stood mechanically, smoothing her simple navy dress. She'd chosen it because it was appropriate but not celebratory. This wasn't a wedding. This was a funeral for the life she'd planned. Luca rose, moving around the table toward her. He was taller than he'd seemed sitting down, easily 6'2", with the kind of presence that made the spacious office feel smaller. When he stopped in front of her, Isabella had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. May I? He asked, his hand hovering near her waist. She nodded stiffly. His hand settled against the small of her back, warm through the fabric of her dress. The photographer positioned them, angling for the best light. Isabella forced her expression into something neutral, not quite smiling, but not obviously miserable. Closer, the photographer directed. Luca's arm drew her against his side. She could feel the solid warmth of him, smell the subtle scent of expensive cologne and something else. Cedar, maybe, or sandalwood. His thumb moved almost imperceptibly against her back, a tiny gesture that might have been comfort, or might have been nothing at all. The camera flashed. Perfect, the photographer said. Just one more. They stood frozen together while the camera flashed again, capturing the moment that Isabella Marino became someone else entirely. The penthouse was everything Isabella had expected and nothing she was prepared for. 20 floors above Columbus Circle, Luca's home occupied the entire top level of a building that probably had its own zip code. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering views of Central Park to the north and the Manhattan skyline spreading in every direction. The interior was all clean lines and expensive materials, marble floors, custom millwork, furniture that looked like art installations. Your room is this way. Isabella followed Luca down a hallway lined with abstract paintings she suspected were originals. He opened a door onto a bedroom that was larger than her entire previous apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in cream linens that probably had a thread count higher than her credit score. An ensuite bathroom was visible through another door, all white marble and brushed gold fixtures. The closet is there, Luca said, gesturing. It's been stocked with basics in your size. If you need anything else, tell Maria. She manages the household. She'll arrange it. Isabella set down the single suitcase she'd brought, containing everything she owned that mattered. This is fine. Your father has been relocated to a secured apartment in Brooklyn. He'll have a monthly allowance sufficient for his needs. How generous! If Luca noticed the sarcasm, he didn't acknowledge it. The terms of our arrangement are simple. You'll join me for dinner each evening I'm home. You'll accompany me to business functions when required. I'll give you at least 2 days' notice. Otherwise, your time is yours. What about you? The question came out before she could stop it. What are your terms? I don't have terms. I have expectations. He moved to the window, looking out over the darkening city. I expect discretion. I expect you to honor the agreement, and I expect you not to make me regret giving your father mercy. The last part carried an edge that reminded Isabella exactly who she'd married. This wasn't some corporate businessman playing at power. Luca Moretti controlled territories, commanded loyalty through fear, and had built an empire on the kind of activities that never appeared in legitimate business filings. I won't, she said quietly. He turned back to her, and for just a moment, something shifted in his expression. I know this isn't what you wanted. Is it what you wanted? I wanted a solution. I got one. He moved toward the door, then paused. Dinner's at 8. Maria will show you to the dining room. Then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone in a bedroom that cost more than most people's homes, married to a man she didn't know, trapped in a life she'd never chosen. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel it. The weight of what she'd done, the finality of the signature on that certificate. Her old life was gone. Her freedom was gone. She'd traded everything to save a father who'd never managed to save himself. The city glittered outside her window, beautiful and indifferent. Isabella didn't cry. She'd run out of tears weeks ago. Dinner that first night was excruciating. The dining room could have seated 20, but a smaller table had been set for 2 at one end, positioned to take advantage of the park views. Candles flickered between them. Maria's touch, Isabella suspected, trying to make this seem like something other than what it was. Luca had changed into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the suit jacket, he looked younger, less intimidating, almost human. "Maria makes excellent risotto," he said, serving her from the dish between them. "I hope you like it." "It's fine." Isabella took a bite. It was more than fine, it was extraordinary, creamy and perfectly seasoned, but admitting that felt like giving something away. They ate in silence for several minutes. The clink of silverware against china was the only sound. "You should know," Luca said finally, "that appearances matter in my world. People will be watching this marriage, looking for weakness. And a reluctant wife is weakness? A wife who obviously despises her husband is problematic." He set down his fork. "I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Isabella, but I'm asking you to be civil in public." "I can manage civil." "Can you manage content? Happy, even?" She met his eyes across the table. "I can pretend, Mr. Moretti. I've been pretending to be fine for months while my father destroyed what was left of our family. I think I can pretend to enjoy your company at parties. It's Luca. You're my wife now. Mr. Moretti makes it sound like I'm your employer." "Aren't you?" His jaw tightened. "No. An employer can fire you. This is permanent." "Until one of us dies," Isabella said lightly. "Then I'm free." The words hung between them, darker than she'd intended. Luca studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you're hoping for? That I'll conveniently die and solve your problem?" "I'm hoping," Isabella said carefully, "that we can both survive this arrangement without destroying each other." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Fair enough." They finished dinner in silence, but it felt different somehow. Less hostile, more like a truce. After Maria cleared the plates, Luca stood. "I have work to do. You're free to explore the apartment, use anything you like. The library has books if you read." "I read." "Good." He hesitated in the doorway. "This doesn't have to be a prison, Isabella." "What else would you call it?" "A partnership. One you entered willingly." "I entered it to save my father's life. That's not the same as willing." "No," Luca agreed quietly. "I suppose it's not." He left her alone in the dining room, surrounded by luxury that felt like glass walls. Beautiful, but imprisoning. Isabella walked to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city teemed with life. Millions of people going about their evening, free to make their own choices, their own mistakes. She was 28 years old and felt ancient, hollowed out by circumstances she couldn't control. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Sarah. "How did it go?" "Call me when you can." Isabella stared at the message. How could she explain this? That she'd married a crime boss to save her gambling addict father, that she was living in a penthouse that looked like a museum, bound to a man who spoke about their marriage like a corporate merger. She typed, "It's done. I'm okay. We'll call soon." The lies came easily now. The first week passed in a strange limbo. Isabella existed in Luca's space without really inhabiting it. She found the library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books that actually appeared to have been read, their spines creased and loved. She discovered the gym, the media room, the office she was clearly not supposed to enter given how quickly Luca closed the door when she walked past. Maria, the housekeeper, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an unflappable demeanor. She managed the penthouse with quiet efficiency, appearing with meals and fresh linens and subtle suggestions about what Isabella might wear to the upcoming charity gala. Mr. Moretti likes his home peaceful, Maria said one morning as they shared coffee in the kitchen. It's good for him, having someone here. I'm not sure I'm much company. You're more than you think, Maria patted her hand. He's not an easy man, but he's not a bad one either. Isabella wanted to ask what that meant, but footsteps in the hallway signaled Luca's approach. Maria bustled away, leaving Isabella alone with her coffee and her thoughts. Luca appeared in workout clothes, his hair damp from the shower. Morning. Morning. He poured his own coffee, moving around the kitchen with easy familiarity. There's a dinner on Friday. Business associates. I need you there. What time? 7. It's formal. I'll be ready. He leaned against the counter, studying her over the rim of his cup. You've been here a week. How are you managing? The question surprised her. I'm managing. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Isabella set down her cup. Did you expect me to be thrilled about this arrangement? No, but I expected you to try. I am trying. I show up for dinner every night. I don't complain. I stay out of your way. You exist like a ghost in my home, Luca said quietly. That's not trying, that's surviving. Maybe that's all I can do right now. He was quiet for a moment, something working behind his eyes. When I was younger, my father arranged a marriage for my sister. She was miserable for years. Walked around like she was already dead, just waiting for it to be official. Isabella looked up sharply. What happened to her? She eventually left, took nothing but her passport and disappeared. We never found her. His expression was carefully neutral. I'm not telling you this as a threat. I'm telling you because I remember what that kind of misery looks like, and I don't want to see it in my own home. Then maybe you shouldn't have married someone you don't love. Maybe you shouldn't have signed the papers if you couldn't live with the consequences. The words stung because they were true. Isabella stood, needing distance. I'll be ready for Friday. She left him in the kitchen, her heart pounding with frustration she couldn't fully name. Anger at him for being right. Anger at herself for being trapped. Anger at her father for putting her here. But as she retreated to her room, something nagged at her. Luca had told her about his sister, had shown her a glimpse of something personal, something that probably hurt. That didn't seem like something a monster would do. The charity gala was held at the Plaza Hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with old money and older traditions. Isabella wore a black gown Maria had selected, elegant, understated, expensive enough to signal status without screaming new money. Diamond earrings borrowed from what Maria called the family collection glittered at her ears. Luca appeared in a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. He offered his arm without comment, and Isabella took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric. Remember, he said quietly as they entered, we're happy, newlyweds, in love. Right, madly in love with your charming personality. His mouth twitched. Try to look less like you're attending a funeral. I'll do my best. The ballroom was full of people who moved through wealth like they were born to it, which they probably were. Women in gowns that cost more than cars, men in tuxedos discussing business deals over champagne, everyone performing the elaborate social dance of the Manhattan elite. Luca guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing her to a blur of names and faces. Isabella smiled until her cheeks hurt, played the role of the happy bride, and tried not to think about how much she wanted to run. Luca Moretti, a man in his 60s, approached, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. I heard you'd gotten married, didn't believe it. Marcus, Luca's tone cooled slightly. This is my wife, Isabella. Marcus looked her over with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl. Beautiful, young. Where did you find her? That's a personal question. Luca's arm tightened around her waist, possessive, protective. How's the real estate business? They talked shop while Isabella stood silent, feeling like an ornament. She let her mind drift, cataloging exit routes and counting the minutes until they could leave. Your husband is quite the enigma, a woman's voice said beside her. Isabella turned to find a stunning redhead in an emerald dress, holding a champagne flute and wearing an expression of amused interest. I'm Sophia, the woman continued. Sophia Chen. I've known Luca for years. Isabella. They shook hands. How do you know him? Our families do business together. Import-export. Sophia's smile suggested she knew exactly what kind of business. I have to say, none of us expected him to marry. He's always been so self-contained. People change. Do they? Sophia's gaze was shrewd. Or do they just get better at hiding who they really are? Before Isabella could respond, Luca's hand found the small of her back. Sophia, always a pleasure. Luca, congratulations on the marriage. Sophia's smile was all teeth. I hope you'll both be very happy. We will be. Luca's tone left no room for doubt. He steered Isabella away smoothly. Sorry about her. Sophia enjoys stirring up trouble. Is she an ex? No, just someone who thinks she knows me better than she does. He glanced down at her. You handled that well. I wasn't aware I was being tested. You're always being tested. That's what tonight is. Seeing if you can hold your own in this world. Isabella stopped walking, forcing him to face her. And if I can't, what then? Then we adjust. His expression softened slightly. But I think you can. You're stronger than you realize. The compliment caught her off guard. Before she could respond, music filled the ballroom, a slow, elegant waltz. Dance with me, Luca said. I know, but we're newlyweds, remember? We should look like we can't keep our hands off each other. He led her to the dance floor, pulling her into position with confident hands. One palm settled against her waist. The other clasped her hand gently. Isabella placed her free hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. Just follow my lead, he murmured. They moved together, and Isabella was surprised to find he was a good dancer, smooth, assured, guiding her through steps she barely knew. Around them, other couples swirled, but she was acutely aware only of Luca, the warmth of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he held her firmly but not possessively. You're tense, he said quietly. I'm being watched by 100 people who are trying to figure out if our marriage is real. Then let's give them a show. He pulled her closer, closing the distance between them until she was pressed against him, moving in perfect synchronization. His hand spread wider on her back, his thumb tracing small circles that sent unexpected warmth through her. Better, he breathed against her ear. Isabella's pulse quickened. This was just an act, she reminded herself, performance for an audience. But her body didn't seem to understand that, responding to his nearness with a flutter of something she didn't want to examine too closely. When the song ended, Luca didn't immediately release her. They stood together in the middle of the dance floor, his dark eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. That was convincing, she managed. Yes, he agreed, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure what they'd been convincing anyone of. The car ride home was quiet. Isabella watched the city slide past, her mind replaying the evening. The dance, the feel of Luca's hands on her, the way he'd looked at her like she was something more than just a business arrangement. You did well tonight, Luca said, breaking the silence. Thank you. I mean it. You handled yourself perfectly. No one will question this marriage after seeing us together. Good. That's what you wanted. It is. He paused. But it's not all I want. Isabella turned to look at him. What else do you want? I want you to be happy here, or at least not miserable. His expression was serious in the dim light. I know this isn't ideal, but it doesn't have to be torture. What would you suggest? We could try being friends. The word hung between them, simple, startling, impossible. Friends, Isabella repeated. Why not? We're living together, sharing meals, attending events as a couple. Might as well try to enjoy each other's company. Friends don't coerce each other into marriage. No, Luca agreed. But married people sometimes become friends. It's not unheard of. Isabella considered this. The alternative was months or years of cold distance, of existing in parallel without ever truly connecting. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe it would be safer. But maybe Luca was right. Maybe they could find some kind of peace in this arrangement if they actually tried. Okay, she said finally. Friends. He smiled. A real smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less dangerous. "Good," he said. "Then as your friend, I should tell you that you looked beautiful tonight." Heat crept into her cheeks. "That's not very friend-like." "Can't friends notice when someone looks nice?" "I suppose." They arrived at the building and Luca helped her from the car with old-fashioned courtesy. In the elevator, he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Dinner?" "I'll be there." "And maybe after, we could watch a movie? Maria mentioned you like old films." Isabella blinked. "You want to watch a movie with me?" Friends do that, don't they? Despite everything, she found herself smiling. "They do." "Then it's a plan." As they entered the penthouse, something had shifted. The space felt less like a prison and more like possibility. Isabella wasn't naive enough to think everything had changed, but maybe Luca was right. Maybe they could try. The following weeks brought a strange new rhythm to their lives. Dinners became less stilted. Luca asked about her day, and Isabella found herself actually answering. She learned he loved old architecture, spent hours studying building designs, and harbored a not-so-secret passion for classic cars he kept in a garage somewhere in New Jersey. She told him about the art history degree she'd never finished, her dream of opening a bookstore, her mother who died when she was 12. He listened with genuine attention, asking questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers. They watched movies together, noir films from the 40s, Italian cinema, the occasional terrible action flick that made them both laugh. Luca would sprawl on one end of the couch, Isabella on the other, a careful distance maintained even as the space between them began to feel less necessary. "This one's terrible," Isabella said one night, 3 weeks into their marriage, as they watched an over-the-top thriller. "Absolutely awful," Luca agreed. "Want to keep watching?" "Obviously." They made it through another 20 minutes before Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shuddered. "I need to take this." He stood, already moving toward his office. "I'll be back." But he wasn't. An hour later, Isabella heard the front door close. Luca leaving for whatever business required his attention at 11 o'clock at night. She went to bed alone, trying not to wonder what exactly her husband did when he disappeared into the night. A month into the marriage, Isabella woke to find a note on the kitchen counter. Had to leave early, business in Brooklyn. Dinner reservations at Maria at 8. Wear something nice. L. Maria appeared with coffee and a knowing smile. "He's planning something." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Moretti doesn't make dinner reservations. He has people do that." Maria set down the cup. "If he's doing it himself, it means something." Isabella tried not to read too much into it, but she found herself taking extra care getting ready that evening. She chose a deep blue dress that Maria enthusiastically approved, styled her dark hair in loose waves, and even added makeup. When she emerged, Luca was waiting in the living room, and the look on his face when he saw her made her pulse quicken. "You look stunning," he said simply. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He did. Dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, somehow managing to look both dangerous and elegant. The restaurant was intimate, expensive, perfect. They were seated at a corner table with views of Central Park's southern edge, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop. "Is there an occasion?" Isabella asked after they'd ordered. "Does there need to be one?" "You made the reservation yourself. Apparently that's significant." Luca's mouth quirked. "Maria talks too much." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "May I?" Isabella nodded, and he laced their fingers together. His palm was warm, slightly calloused, hands that did more than sign papers and make calls. "I wanted to do something nice," he said. "You've been trying, really trying. I appreciate it." "You've been trying too." "Have I?" "Yes, the movies, the conversations, asking about my day like you actually care." "I do care." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "That's the problem." Isabella's breath caught. "Problem?" This was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement, but you're making it complicated. "I haven't done anything." "You exist," Luca interrupted gently. "You laugh at terrible movies and argue with me about books. and look at me sometimes like I might be human instead of a monster. That's what you've done." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous. "I don't think you're a monster," Isabella said softly. "You should. It would be safer." "For who?" "For both of us." Their food arrived, breaking the moment. They ate slowly, the conversation flowing easier now, touching on everything and nothing. Isabella found herself laughing genuinely, surprised by Luca's dry wit and unexpected observations. "Tell me something," she said as they shared dessert. "Something real, not small talk." Luca considered her request. "What do you want to know?" "Why did you really need a wife?" "The real reason, not the business answer." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My father built this empire on fear and violence. When he died, everyone expected me to be the same. Brutal, uncontrollable, a rabid dog they could point at their enemies." "And you're not?" "I can be, when necessary." His expression darkened. "But I want to build something different, something that lasts beyond intimidation. That requires appearing stable, settled, the kind of man who has a wife and a home and a life beyond bloodshed. So I'm legitimacy." "You're more than that now." His eyes met hers. "You're becoming someone I actually want to come home to." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. "Luca, I know. Too much, too fast. I'm sorry." He signaled for the check. "We should go." The drive home was charged with unspoken things. When they arrived at the penthouse, Luca walked her to her bedroom door, something he'd never done before. "Thank you for tonight," Isabella said. "Thank you for being here." He hesitated, then leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Isabella." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the hallway, her skin tingling where his lips had touched, her mind racing with possibilities she absolutely should not be considering. This was supposed to be business, but it was becoming something else entirely. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. Conversations grew longer, deeper. Luca started coming home earlier, like he was eager to see her. They cooked together sometimes, Isabella teaching him recipes her mother had taught her, Luca surprising her with unexpected skill at chopping vegetables. One evening, he came home to find her curled on the couch, crying over a movie. "What happened?" He was beside her instantly, concern etched across his face. "It's stupid." She wiped at her tears. "The dog died. It's a movie and I'm crying over a fake dog." Something in his expression softened. "It's not stupid." He sat beside her, closer than usual. "You have a good heart, Isabella. Don't apologize for that." She leaned into him without thinking, and his arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. They stayed like that through the rest of the movie, Isabella tucked against Luca's chest, his hand running soothing patterns along her arm. It felt right in a way that terrified her. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Isabella had to admit the truth. She was falling for her husband, the man she'd married to save her father, the crime boss who controlled half of Manhattan's underground, the dangerous stranger who'd somehow become the person she most wanted to see every day. It was foolish, dangerous, completely inevitable, and she had no idea what to do about it. 3 months into their marriage, Isabella woke feeling nauseous. She blamed it on the rich dinner from the night before and went about her day. But when it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that, a terrible suspicion began to form. She bought a pregnancy test at a pharmacy 3 blocks from the apartment, hands shaking as she paid cash. In the penthouse bathroom, she took the test, then waited the longest 3 minutes of her life. 2 lines. Positive. Isabella stared at the test, her mind reeling. This wasn't supposed to happen. They'd been careful. They weren't even sleeping together. Except they had been. Once. 6 weeks ago, after another charity gala, both of them buzzed on champagne and the heady intimacy that had been building between them. They'd stumbled into his bedroom, hands and mouths urgent, falling into each other with a passion that had surprised them both. They'd never discussed it afterward, had gone back to their separate rooms, their careful distance. But the memory of it burned in Isabella's mind, the feel of his hands on her skin, the taste of his kiss, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. Now there was this, a consequence, a complication, a baby. Isabella pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. She should tell Luca. They were married. He had a right to know. But something held her back. Some instinct that whispered, wait, learn more, be sure. She called a doctor, made an appointment for the following week, hid the pregnancy test at the bottom of her trash, buried under tissues and packaging. At dinner that night, Luca asked if she was feeling all right. You seem quiet, he said, studying her across the table. Just tired. You've been tired a lot lately. I haven't been sleeping well. He frowned. Is something wrong? The nightmares again? He remembered. She'd mentioned the nightmares once, weeks ago, and he'd remembered. It's nothing, Isabella lied. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She was pregnant with the child of a man who controlled his empire through violence and fear. A man she'd somehow fallen in love with despite every rational instinct screaming at her to protect her heart. A man whose world she was about to bring a child into. The thought filled her with equal parts wonder and terror. Oh, the doctor confirmed it a week later. 8 weeks pregnant. Everything looked healthy. She'd need to start prenatal vitamins, cut out alcohol, come back for regular appointments. Congratulations, the doctor said warmly. Does the father know? Not yet. I wanted to be sure first. Well, you're definitely sure now. Isabella walked home through Central Park, her mind spinning. She needed to tell Luca. Tonight, over dinner. She'd say the words and face whatever came next. But when she arrived at the penthouse, Luca's office door was closed, and voices filtered through, angry, intense. She caught fragments. Can't keep letting them push. Territory rights were established. Send a message. They won't forget. The voices cut off abruptly. Luca's office door opened, and 2 men Isabella didn't recognize emerged. They were the kind of men who looked dangerous, even in expensive suits, cold eyes, hard faces, the air of violence barely restrained. They nodded to her as they passed, their gazes assessing, dismissive. Luca appeared in the doorway, tension radiating from him. When he saw Isabella, his expression shifted, frustration giving way to concern. How long have you been standing there? I just got home. Who were they? Associates. Nothing for you to worry about. He rubbed his face tiredly. I need to go out tonight. Business that can't wait. Luca, I'm sorry. I know we had plans. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become casual between them. Don't wait up. He was gone before she could tell him, before she could say the words that would change everything. Isabella stood alone in the elegant penthouse, one hand pressed to her stomach, and wondered what kind of world she was bringing her child into. That night, unable to sleep, Isabella wandered into Luca's office. She knew she shouldn't. This was his private space, the one room in the penthouse that was entirely his. But she needed to understand, needed to see what he really did when he left in the middle of the night, who he really was beneath the gentleness he showed her. The office was immaculate. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, walls lined with books and art. Nothing obviously incriminating. She was about to leave when she noticed the drawer slightly ajar. Just a peek, she told herself, just enough to understand. Inside were files, documents with names and numbers, territory maps, business agreements that had nothing to do with legitimate business, and photos, surveillance shots of people she didn't recognize, some with red X's marked across their faces. Isabella's hand shook as she lifted one of the files. Inside were transaction records for shipments that could only be drugs or weapons, detailed accounts of money moving through shell corporations, evidence of exactly the kind of empire Luca controlled. She'd known. Of course she'd known. But seeing it in black and white made it real in a way she'd been avoiding. She was about to close the drawer when she heard it, a sound from deeper in the penthouse. Footsteps. Voices. Luca was home. Isabella shoved the file back, her heart pounding. But as she turned to flee, she knocked against the desk, and a pen rolled off, clattering to the floor with what sounded like deafening noise. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. Isabella stood frozen as Luca appeared in the doorway. He wasn't alone. The 2 men from earlier flanked him, and all 3 stopped when they saw her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Isabella. Luca's voice was carefully neutral. What are you doing in here? I couldn't sleep. I was just... The lie died in her throat as she saw his expression. Gentlemen, Luca said quietly, Give us a moment. The two men left, but their presence lingered like a threat. Luca closed the office door, then turned to face her. Were you going through my things? No, I mean, yes, but Isabella's hands twisted together. I just wanted to understand. Understand what? Who you are. What you really do. She gestured at the desk. All of this. You knew what I was when you married me. I knew in theory. I didn't know. She couldn't finish. Luca moved to the desk, his movements controlled but tense. You didn't know what? That I'm exactly what people say? That the money that paid your father's debt came from activities you don't want to think about? I knew that. Then what's changed? I'm pregnant, she wanted to scream. I'm carrying your child, and I don't know if I can raise a baby in this world. But the words wouldn't come. Not now. Not like this. Nothing, she said finally. Nothing's changed. Luca studied her, and she could see him weighing her words, measuring their truth. Go to bed, Isabella. We'll talk in the morning. It was a dismissal. She took it, fleeing to her bedroom like a coward. Behind her, she heard Luca's office door close, heard the low murmur of voices resume, heard the sound of her husband returning to the business she couldn't face. Isabella lay in bed, one hand on her stomach, and tried to imagine a future where this could work, where she could love a man who lived in shadows and violence, where she could raise a child in this beautiful, terrible world. She couldn't, but she also couldn't imagine leaving him. The contradiction was tearing her apart. She woke to find Luca sitting in the chair by her bed, watching her in the gray pre-dawn light. How long have you been there? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Not long. He looked exhausted, still wearing his clothes from the night before. I need you to understand something. Isabella sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. Okay. What I do, the business, the territories, all of it, it's not who I want to be, but it's who I have to be to survive in this world. His eyes were dark, intense. When my father died, I inherited his empire and his enemies. I can't just walk away. They'd see it as weakness. Come after everything I've built, everyone I care about. Including me? Especially you. The moment you became my wife, you became a target. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's why I need you to stay out of my office, out of that part of my life. It's not hiding things from you. It's protecting you. From what? From knowledge that could get you killed. He said it simply, like he was discussing the weather. There are people who would use you against me if they knew you mattered, people who would hurt you to send me a message. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they crystallized something she'd been avoiding. Luca loved her. Maybe he hadn't said it. Maybe he never would. But he loved her enough to fear for her safety. I matter to you, she said softly. Yes. No hesitation. You matter. I matter enough that you'd kill to protect me. Without question, without hesitation. His gaze never wavered. Does that frighten you? It should. It absolutely should. No, Isabella whispered. It doesn't. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition. He stood, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. His hand found hers, fingers threading together. I never wanted this to be real, he said quietly. It was supposed to be simple, a transaction. But you made it impossible to keep my distance. I didn't mean to. I'm glad you did. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe ever. Isabella's throat tightened. This was the moment. She should tell him about the pregnancy, about the life growing inside her, about the choice they'd soon have to make about their future. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. I have to go. There's a situation that needs handling. He stood, still holding her hand. We'll talk more tonight. Really talk. About us. About what this is becoming. Luca. Tonight, Cara. I promise. He kissed her forehead and left, and Isabella was alone with her secret and her fears and the growing certainty that tonight's conversation would change everything. She just didn't know how. Isabella spent the day rehearsing what she would say. The words formed and reformed in her mind as she moved through the penthouse, her hand drifting unconsciously to her stomach every few minutes. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. You're going to be a father. Each version felt simultaneously too simple and impossibly complicated. Maria noticed her distraction over lunch. You feeling all right, Mrs. Moretti? You've barely touched your food. I'm fine, just thinking. Isabella pushed the salad around her plate, her stomach too unsettled for eating. Thinking about Mr. Moretti? Maria's knowing smile suggested she'd witnessed this kind of preoccupation before. He's been different these past months. Lighter. You're good for him. Am I? The question came out more uncertain than Isabella intended. You love him. It wasn't a question. Maria patted her hand gently. And he loves you, though he probably hasn't figured out how to say it yet. Men like him, they're not used to vulnerability. Isabella wanted to ask what Maria meant by men like him, but the housekeeper was already clearing plates, humming softly to herself. The afternoon dragged. Isabella tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to watch television, but the noise grated on her nerves. Finally, she retreated to the library, surrounding herself with books she didn't open, waiting for Luca to come home so she could tell him the truth that was going to change everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Luca. Running late. Dinner at 9. I promise I'll be there. She typed back, I'll be waiting. We need to talk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, is everything okay? Yes, just important. Okay, see you soon. Isabella stared at the exchange, her heart pounding. In a few hours, she would tell him. They would figure this out together. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe he would smile and pull her close and tell her they'd make it work. Maybe. The sound of the front door opening jolted her from her thoughts. But it was too early, only 7 o'clock. Luca wasn't supposed to be home for 2 more hours. She heard voices. Angry voices. Then Luca's office door slamming shut. Isabella moved into the hallway, uncertain. Should she check on him? Give him space? The uncertainty paralyzed her until she heard something shatter. Glass breaking, a violent sound that made her jump. She was moving before she could think better of it, crossing the living room toward his office. The door was slightly ajar, and through it she could hear Luca's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. I don't care what Castellano wants. The answer is no. A pause. He must be on the phone. He can threaten all he wants. I'm not moving product through the ports. That's a line I won't cross. Another pause, longer this time. Then tell him to come say it to my face instead of sending his dogs to deliver messages. Isabella's hand hovered over the doorknob. She should leave. This was exactly what he'd warned her about. The business, the danger, the parts of his life she was supposed to stay separate from. But something in his voice held her there. Not anger, exhaustion, the weariness of a man carrying weight he couldn't put down. No. No more meetings, no more negotiations. Luca's voice dropped. Deadly quiet. You tell Castellano that if he comes after what's mine again, I'll bury him so deep his own people won't remember his name. The call ended. Silence filled the office. Then, you can come in, Isabella. I know you're there. She pushed the door open slowly. Luca stood by the window, his back to her, one hand braced against the glass. His jacket was off, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and she could see the tension in every line of his body. I'm sorry, she said. I heard glass break. I was worried. You should be in bed, resting. It's only 7. I know. He didn't turn around. I came home early because I wanted to clean this up before you saw it. Clean what up? Instead of answering, he gestured to his desk. Isabella moved closer and saw what she'd missed from the doorway. A pool of red across the mahogany surface, dripping onto the floor. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought it was blood. Then she saw the shattered remains of what had been a glass of wine. Someone made me angry, Luca said flatly. I threw a glass. It was childish, and I'm sorry you had to see it. What happened? Nothing you need to worry about. Luca, I mean it. He finally turned to face her, and the look in his eyes stopped her cold. This was the man people feared, the one who controlled territories through intimidation and violence. His expression was carved from stone, his eyes dark and dangerous. This is exactly why I keep you separate from my business. Because this is who I am when I'm dealing with that world, and you don't need to see it. Maybe I do. Isabella moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Maybe I need to see all of you, not just the parts you think are safe to show me. There's nothing safe about me right now. He took a step back, maintaining distance. I'm angry enough that I'm not sure I trust myself. So please, Isabella, go back to your room and let me deal with this. No. The word hung between them. Luca's jaw tightened. No? I'm not a child you can send away when things get difficult. She crossed her arms, standing her ground even as her pulse raced. I'm your wife. And if we're really going to try to make this work, if what we have is going to be real, then you can't keep shutting me out every time your other life intrudes. My other life is what pays for this penthouse. What keeps your father safe? What makes me the man powerful enough to protect you? I know that. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what that actually means. He moved toward her, not threatening, but intense, closing the distance between them. It means I make decisions that would horrify you. It means sometimes I have to hurt people to maintain control. It means I live in a world where showing weakness gets you killed, and caring about someone is the greatest weakness of all. Then why do you care about me? The question stopped him. For a long moment, Luca just looked at her, something working behind his eyes. Because I couldn't help it, he said finally, his voice rough. Because you walked into my home playing the role of dutiful wife and somehow became the person I can't stop thinking about. Because every time I leave here, I'm counting the minutes until I can come back and see your face. Isabella's breath caught. Luca, I love you. The words came out harsh, almost angry, like an accusation. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I love you, Isabella, and it terrifies me because love is leverage. It's ammunition for my enemies. It's the thing that could destroy everything I've built. She reached for him, but he caught her wrists, holding her at arm's length. Don't, he said. Don't touch me right now. Not when I'm like this. Like what? Dangerous. Barely controlled. One wrong move away from doing something we'll both regret. Isabella looked up at him, at the tension in his jaw, the heat in his dark eyes, the way his hands gripped her wrists just a shade too tight. This was the man beneath the gentleness, the violence he'd learned to contain but never fully tamed. She should be afraid. She wasn't. I'm pregnant. The words escaped before she could stop them, rushed and graceless, nothing like the careful speech she'd planned. But they had the desired effect. Luca went absolutely still. His hands loosened on her wrists, falling away as he stared at her. What? I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out last week. I was going to tell you tonight at dinner, but she was babbling now, the words tumbling out. I took a test, and then I saw a doctor to confirm, and everything looks healthy. I know this wasn't planned, and we'd only been together that one time, but you're pregnant. He said it like he was testing the weight of the words. With my child. Yes. For a week you've known this and you didn't tell me. It wasn't quite an accusation, but it wasn't approval either. Isabella twisted her hands together, defensive. I needed to be sure. And I needed to figure out how to tell you. We've never even discussed children or whether we wanted... She broke off. Are you angry? Luca moved to the chair behind his desk and sat heavily, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. No, he said finally. I'm not angry. Then what are you? Terrified. The honesty in his voice cut through her. Absolutely terrified that I'm going to fail you both, that my world is going to swallow our child whole the way it's tried to swallow me. Isabella moved around the desk, kneeling beside his chair so they were eye to eye. We'll figure it out. Together. How? How do I protect a child from the people who want to hurt me? How do I raise a son or daughter in this life and keep them innocent? His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. How do I deserve this? Deserve you? Deserve the family you're offering me? You don't have to deserve it. You just have to want it. I do want it. The words were barely a whisper. More than anything. But want isn't enough. Then what is? Instead of answering, Luca pulled her up into his lap, wrapping his arms around her with a fierceness that stole her breath. His face buried in her neck, and she felt the shudder that ran through him. A baby, he murmured against her skin. We're having a baby. We are. Isabella's hand found his hair, fingers threading through the dark strands. Are you okay? I don't know. He pulled back enough to look at her, and she saw wonder mixed with fear in his expression. Ask me tomorrow. Right now, I'm just trying to process that my life just changed completely. Our life, she corrected gently. Our life. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Say it again, that you're pregnant. I'm pregnant. His hand moved to her stomach, pressing gently against the flat surface where their child grew. There's really a baby in there? There really is. When is it due? January? Early January, the doctor thinks. Isabella covered his hand with hers. I know this is terrifying. It terrifies me too. But we can do this, Luca. We can build something good for our child. In my world? His expression darkened. There's nothing good about my world. Then we change it. You've already started. You told me you wanted to build something different than your father did. This is your chance. It's not that simple. I know, but we have months to figure it out. Months to plan and prepare and make this penthouse into a home for our family. Luca was quiet for a long moment, his hand still resting on her stomach. Then he lifted her chin, making her meet his eyes. I'm going to make mistakes, he said. I don't know how to be a father. I barely know how to be a husband. You're doing fine at the husband part. Am I? His thumb traced her lower lip. I've kept you at arm's length for months. Pushed you away every time we got too close. That one night we spent together, I told myself it was a mistake, that we should go back to the arrangement, keep it simple. And now? Now I'm realizing that was the biggest mistake of all, pretending I didn't want you, pretending this was just business. He kissed her softly, a gentle press of lips that still managed to send heat through her. I love you, Isabella, and I'm going to love our child. And somehow, I'm going to figure out how to give you both the life you deserve. Tears pricked Isabella's eyes. I love you too. Even knowing what I am, what I do. Even knowing. She kissed him again, deeper this time. I won't pretend I'm not scared. But I'm more scared of trying to do this without you than I am of your world. Luca gathered her closer, and they sat there in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his dangerous life, holding each other like lifelines. Outside, the city glittered with a million lights. Inside, everything had changed. A baby. Their baby. The future they'd never planned but somehow couldn't imagine living without. Eventually, they moved to the bedroom, Luca's bedroom, not the separate room Isabella had been using. He undressed her slowly, reverently, pausing to press kisses to her stomach where their child grew. I can't believe there's a person in there, he murmured. Someone who's half you and half me. Believe it. Isabella's hands found his shoulders, drawing him up to kiss her properly. In a few months, you won't be able to miss it. They made love slowly, tenderly, with none of the desperate urgency of that first night. This was different. A claiming, a promise, a future being written in touches and whispers and the tangle of their bodies. Afterward, Isabella lay in the circle of Luca's arms, her back pressed to his chest, his hand splayed possessively over her stomach. We should get married again, he said suddenly. She twisted to look at him. We're already married. We signed papers in a law office. That's not the same thing. His fingers traced patterns on her skin. I want to marry you properly, in front of people who matter. Make vows that actually mean something. You want a wedding? I want to stand up in front of the world and claim you as mine. I want our child to know that their parents chose each other, not just made a business arrangement. He kissed her shoulder. I want to give you something better than what we had. Isabella's throat tightened. When? Soon, before you start showing. A smile ghosted across his face. Unless you want to wait, we could do it after the baby comes. No, soon is good. I'd like to marry you for real, Luca Moretti. Then we'll make it happen. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since Isabella had signed those papers months ago, she felt something like hope. The next weeks were a blur of planning and preparation. Luca insisted on a small ceremony, just close friends and family, nothing ostentatious. He wanted it meaningful, not performative. Whose family for you? Isabella asked one evening as they reviewed guest lists. Your sister disappeared. Your father is dead. Who do you actually consider family? Luca was quiet for a moment. Marco, my second in command. He's been with me since we were teenagers. Saved my life more than once. He paused. And Maria, She's been running my household for 10 years. She's more mother to me than my actual mother ever was. Your mother's alive? Technically. She lives in Italy now. Moved back after my father died. We're not close. His tone suggested the subject was closed. Isabella didn't push. She had her own complicated relationship with family. Her father, who she loved despite everything, but who she couldn't quite forgive for putting her in this position. He'd been invited to the wedding, of course, but things between them remained strained. The doctor appointments became routine. Every 2 weeks, Isabella went to hear the heartbeat, see the ultrasound images that barely looked like anything yet. Luca came to every single appointment, holding her hand while they listened to the rapid flutter of their baby's heart. "Sounds strong," the doctor said during the 12-week visit. "Everything looks perfect." "Can you tell what it is yet?" Luca asked. "Not quite. Another few weeks and we should be able to see if you want to know." In the car afterward, Luca asked, "Do you want to know?" "I think so." "You?" "Yes. I want to know everything about this baby, every detail." His hand found hers. "Boy or girl, I don't care. As long as they're healthy." Spoken like a true father-to-be. He smiled, and Isabella marveled at how much he'd changed in the months since their arrangement began. The cold, controlled man she'd married had softened into someone warmer, more open. Someone who smiled easily and laughed at her jokes and held her through the morning sickness that still plagued her most days. But she also couldn't forget what she'd seen in his office that night. The anger, the violence barely restrained, the phone call about territories and threats and buried bodies. Luca Moretti was still a dangerous man. He just hid it better now. The wedding was planned for a Saturday afternoon in late October, in the garden of an estate Luca owned in Westchester. Isabella found a simple white dress that wouldn't be too tight in a few months when her body started changing. Luca wore a dark suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. The night before the ceremony, lying in bed together, Luca turned to her with sudden seriousness. "I need to tell you something. Before tomorrow. Before we do this for real." Isabella's stomach clenched. "Okay. I've been working on getting out of the illegal side of the business." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "It's slow, complicated. I can't just walk away without consequences, but I'm building legitimate businesses to replace the income. Real estate, import-export operations that actually import and export legal goods. Technology investments." "How long have you been doing this?" "I started the process a few months ago, right around when I realized I was in love with you." His hand found her stomach, resting there gently. "But finding out about the baby accelerated everything. I don't want our child growing up with a father who might end up in prison or dead in a territorial dispute." "Is it dangerous, leaving?" "Everything I do is dangerous." He said it matter-of-factly. "But yes, there are people who see it as weakness, who might try to take advantage. That's why I've been careful, strategic, making it look like evolution rather than retreat." "How long until you're completely out?" "A year. Maybe less if things go smoothly." He kissed her forehead. "I'm telling you this because tomorrow, when I make vows to you, I want them to be based on truth. The truth is, I'm trying to become someone better. For you. For our family. But I'm not there yet." Isabella absorbed this, her mind racing. "What happens if someone tries to stop you from getting out?" "Then I deal with it." Deal with it how?" He met her eyes steadily. "However necessary. I won't let anyone threaten what we're building, even if that means getting my hands dirty one more time." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they felt like protection, like the promise of a man who would do whatever it took to keep his family safe. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay." "I trust you to handle it. Just promise me you'll be careful, that you'll come home." Her hand covered his where it rested on her stomach. "We need you." "I promise." Luca gathered her close, and they lay together in the darkness, on the edge of a future neither of them could quite predict, but both desperately wanted. The wedding was perfect, small, intimate, exactly what Isabella had needed. Her father cried through the ceremony. Maria beamed from the front row. Marco, Luca's second in command, a man with kind eyes and hands that had clearly seen violence, stood as best man. When Luca said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, to protect you and our family with everything I have, to build a life worthy of you, to become the man you deserve. Isabella's own vows were simpler. I choose you, today and every day. In this life we're building together. They kissed as husband and wife, truly husband and wife now, and Isabella felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. The reception was held in the garden, strings of lights turning the autumn afternoon into something magical. They danced together, Luca holding her carefully, mindful of the tiny life growing between them. Happy? He asked, his lips near her ear. Yes? You? Happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes soft. Thank you. For what? For taking a chance on me, for seeing past what I am to what I could be. Isabella kissed him softly. Thank you for becoming that man. They danced until the sun set, surrounded by the few people who mattered, wrapped in the fragile hope of new beginnings. That night, back in their penthouse, Luca made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, he whispered against her skin. I'm going to make this work. All of it. The business transition, the family we're building. I swear to you, Isabella, I'm going to give you the life you deserve. She believed him. In that moment, wrapped in his arms, she believed every word. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks later, Isabella woke to Luca's side of the bed empty. She found him in his office, bent over his desk, his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes. Find him. He ended the call, looking up to find Isabella in the doorway. His expression was grim. What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. Luca. Please, Cara, not now. The dismissal in his tone stung. Isabella retreated, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Over the following days, Luca became distant again. He left early, came home late. When he was home, he was preoccupied, his mind clearly elsewhere. The warmth they'd built seemed to evaporate overnight. At her 16-week appointment, the ultrasound revealed the baby's sex. It's a boy, the technician said with a smile. A healthy baby boy. Isabella stared at the screen, at the tiny form of her son, and felt tears spill over. Luca squeezed her hand, but when she looked at him, his expression was troubled. In the car afterward, she asked, What's going on? And don't tell me nothing. You've been somewhere else for days. Luca gripped the steering wheel tightly. There's a problem. With the transition out of the business, someone is pushing back, hard. Who? Castellano. Remember the phone call you overheard? At her nod, he continued. He sees my exit as an opportunity. Thinks he can take my territories while I'm distracted with going legitimate. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. He glanced at her. I'm sorry I've been distant. I'm trying to handle this without it touching you, without it touching our family. Maybe you should let me in instead of shutting me out. You're pregnant. You don't need this stress. I'm your wife. I can handle it. Luca pulled the car over, turning to face her. Can you handle knowing that I might have to hurt people? That I might have to do things that will give you nightmares? Because that's what this is going to require if Castellano doesn't back down. Isabella met his gaze steadily. I can handle knowing you'll do what's necessary to protect us. What I can't handle is you pulling away and leaving me in the dark. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try to let you in. But if it gets too dark, you have to tell me. Promise me that. I promise. They drove home in silence, but Luca's hand found hers, holding tight. That evening, he told her everything. About Castellano's moves against his territories, about the pressure from other families to respond with violence, about the delicate balance he was trying to maintain between showing strength and not derailing his exit strategy. If I respond too aggressively, it looks like I'm still in the game. But if I'm too passive, everyone will see weakness and come for what's mine. He rubbed his face tiredly. It's a tightrope, and I'm not sure I can walk it much longer. What if you just gave him the territories, let him have what he wants? That's not how this works. Giving up territory without a fight doesn't look like wisdom. It looks like defeat, and defeat invites more attacks. Luca pulled her close. I'll figure it out. I always do. But as the weeks passed, Isabella could see the toll it was taking on him. He grew harder, more volatile. The gentle man who'd held her through morning sickness was buried under layers of stress and violence barely contained. She was 20 weeks pregnant, finally starting to show, when everything came to a head. Luca came home at 2 in the morning, and Isabella heard him moving through the penthouse. She got up, finding him in his office, standing over his desk with blood on his hands. Her stomach turned. What happened? He looked up, and for a moment she saw something terrible in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by careful blankness. Go back to bed, Isabella. You're bleeding. It's not my blood. He said it flatly. Go back to bed. But she couldn't move, couldn't look away from the blood, dark and terrible, staining his hands, his shirt cuffs. Whose blood is it? Someone who made a very bad decision. Luca moved to the wet bar in his office, pouring himself a drink with hands that trembled slightly. Someone who thought threatening my wife was a good way to get my attention. The words took a moment to register. Someone threatened me? Castellano sent men to your doctor's office. They followed you home from your appointment yesterday. He downed the drink in one swallow. They were going to use you to force my hand, make me give up territories in exchange for your safety. Isabella's hand went to her stomach instinctively. What did you do? I handled it. His eyes met hers, and they were cold, empty. I made sure they understood that touching you was the last mistake they'd ever make. You killed them. It wasn't a question. Luca didn't deny it. They threatened you and our child. There's nothing I wouldn't do to protect you both. He poured another drink. I warned you, Isabella. I told you this was who I am when it comes to my business. She should be horrified. She should be running for the door, calling the police, doing something other than standing there staring at her husband's blood-stained hands. But all she felt was a terrible, conflicting mix of revulsion and gratitude. He'd killed for her, to protect her, and some dark part of her was glad he'd done it. I need you to leave, Luca said quietly. Right now. Before I say or do something we'll both regret. I'm not safe to be around when I'm like this. I'm not leaving you. Isabella, no. She moved closer, even as every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance. You're my husband. You protected our family. I'm not running away because you got blood on your hands doing it. You should be terrified of me right now. I am. The admission came out shakily. But I'm more terrified of what could have happened if you hadn't stopped them. Luca stared at her, something breaking in his expression. You're going to make me believe I can be better than this, that I can be the man you deserve. You already are. I'm standing here covered in blood. You're standing here having protected your family. That's what fathers do. The word fathers seemed to undo him. Luca crossed the space between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms despite the blood, despite everything. I love you, he said roughly. I love you, and I'm terrified I'm going to destroy you. Isabella held him tight, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. You won't. We won't let you. They stood like that for long minutes, holding each other in the wreckage of his other life, while their baby, their son, grew between them, blissfully unaware of the violence that surrounded his existence. Finally, Luca pulled away. I need to clean up, and then I need to make some calls. This isn't over. What else is there? Castellano will retaliate. What I did tonight, it's a declaration of war. His hand cupped her face gently. Which means I need to make arrangements to keep you safe. What kind of arrangements? A safe house somewhere outside the city, somewhere he can't touch you. I'm not leaving you. It's temporary, just until I handle this situation permanently. At her skeptical look, he added, I'm serious, Isabella. I won't risk you or our son. Not for anything. She wanted to argue, to insist she could stay, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was non-negotiable. How long? A few days. A week at most. He kissed her forehead. I promise, Cara. I'll end this, and then we can go back to building the life we planned. Isabella wanted to believe him, but as she watched Luca disappear into the bathroom to wash the blood from his hands, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The violence he'd kept carefully separate from their life together had crashed through every barrier, and seeing it, really seeing it, had changed something in her she couldn't quite name. She loved him. That hadn't changed, but for the first time she understood the true cost of that love. and she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to pay it. The safe house was a renovated farmhouse 2 hours north of the city, surrounded by woods that turned brilliant gold and crimson in the October light. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Isabella felt like she was living in a cage made of autumn leaves and good intentions. Marco had driven her there the morning after the incident, while Luca stayed behind to deal with what he called the fallout. The older man had been kind but firm, explaining the security protocols with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. 2 guards on rotation outside. Don't leave the property without calling Luca first. Keep your phone charged and on you at all times. Marco had paused at the door, his weathered face softening. He's doing this because he loves you, not because he doesn't trust you to handle yourself. I know. Isabella had pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the first flutters of movement that had started a few days ago. Just tell him to be careful. Always am, Marco had replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of pacing the farmhouse, of jumping at every sound, of waiting for phone calls that came irregularly and told her nothing useful. Luca's voice was always controlled when they spoke, giving her updates that felt carefully edited. Everything's fine, just tying up loose ends. Making progress. Should have you home soon. Missing you. How's our son? She wanted to scream at him to tell her the truth, but the exhaustion in his voice stopped her every time. Whatever he was dealing with, it was taking a toll. On the 4th night, Isabella stood at the farmhouse window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. Her phone buzzed. Not Luca. Her father. Bella. Marco Marino's voice was thin, strained. I need to see you. Papa, I can't right now. I know where you are. Luca told me. He paused. There's something I need to tell you. About Castellano. About why he's really coming after Luca. Isabella's stomach clenched. What do you mean? Not over the phone. Can you come to my apartment? Please, Bella. It's important. Every instinct told her this was a bad idea, but the desperation in her father's voice pulled at something deep inside her. I have to ask Luca first. No, the word was sharp. Don't tell him, not until you hear what I have to say. After that, you can tell him everything. But I need to explain this to you first. Papa, please, Isabella, I'm your father. When have I ever asked you for anything that really mattered? The irony of the question would have been funny if it weren't so painful. Her father had asked her for everything, her freedom, her future, her life, and she'd given it all. Fine, tomorrow morning, but I can only stay an hour. That's all I need. Thank you, Bella. After he hung up, Isabella stared at her phone, unease coiling through her. She should call Luca, tell him about the conversation, but some part of her needed to hear what her father had to say first, needed to understand the full picture before bringing it to her husband. She told herself it was the right decision, that one meeting couldn't hurt. She was wrong. The next morning, Isabella slipped out before sunrise. The guards were changing shifts. She'd timed it carefully, watching their patterns over the past days. There was a 10-minute window where the driveway was unwatched. She took her car and drove toward the city, her heart pounding the entire way. Her father's apartment in Brooklyn was small, shabby, nothing like the home they'd lived in before his gambling destroyed everything. Marco answered the door looking worse than she'd ever seen him, gaunt, hollow-eyed, shaking. Papa, are you okay? Come in, quickly. He ushered her inside, checking the hallway before closing the door. The apartment smelled stale. Empty bottles lined the counter. Isabella's heart sank. Have you been drinking? I needed courage for this conversation. Marco moved to the window, peering through the blinds. Castellano came to see me 2 days ago. What? Why? Because he knows. Her father turned to face her, his expression anguished. He knows I'm the reason Luca is trying to get out of the business. He knows about you and the baby, and he's going to use it against both of you unless... Unless what? Marco's hands twisted together. Unless I help him, give him information about Luca's operations, his transition plans, everything. Isabella felt cold spread through her chest. Please tell me you didn't... I said no. I told him I wouldn't betray Luca after everything he's done for us. Her father's voice cracked. But he said if I don't help him, he'll make sure you and the baby pay the price. He said he'd wait until the child was born, and then he couldn't finish. Why are you telling me this? Why not tell Luca? Because I needed you to hear it from me first. Needed you to understand that whatever happens next, I was trying to protect you. Marco moved closer, gripping her shoulders. Bella, you need to leave. Take the baby and disappear. Go somewhere neither Luca nor Castellano can find you. I'm not running from my husband. Luca's world is going to destroy you. Can't you see that? This baby, your son, he's going to grow up surrounded by violence and death and... Stop. Isabella pulled away from him. You don't get to lecture me about protecting my child. You're the reason I'm in this situation. You're the one who gambled away everything and forced me to marry Luca to save your worthless life. The words came out harsher than she intended, but she couldn't take them back. Marco flinched like she'd struck him. I know, he said quietly. I know what I did, and I've hated myself every day for it. But that's exactly why I'm telling you this now. You still have a chance to get out, to build a different life. I don't want a different life. I want the one I have with Luca. Even knowing what he is? What he's done? Yes. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. Even knowing everything. Marco stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'll tell Castellano no. Whatever happens to me, happens. You need to tell Luca about this conversation today. I will, after you're safely back at the safe house. Her father moved to hug her, and she let him, feeling the frailty in his frame. I'm sorry, Bella, for all of it. I know, Papa. She left soon after, her mind spinning. On the drive back, she tried to process everything. Castellano threatening her father. The demand for information. One moment she was alone on the country road. She was so focused on her thoughts that she didn't notice the car following her until it was too late. One moment she was alone on the country road leading back to the safe house. The next, a black SUV was forcing her off the road, her tires skidding on gravel as she fought for control. Her car came to a stop against a tree, the impact jolting, but not severe. Before she could process what was happening, men were surrounding her vehicle, yanking open the door. Out! Now! Isabella's hands went instinctively to her stomach, protecting the swell where her son grew. Please, I'm pregnant. We know. That's why you're worth something. The man who spoke was tall, cold-eyed, with a scar running down his left cheek. Castellano wants to meet the woman who made Luca Moretti go soft. They pulled her from the car roughly. Isabella tried to fight, tried to scream, but a hand clamped over her mouth and she was being dragged toward the SUV. Then gunfire erupted. The men surrounding her scattered, returning fire toward the trees. Through the chaos, Isabella saw him, Marco, Luca's second-in-command, emerging from cover with a gun in each hand, his kind face transformed into something deadly. Get down! He shouted. Isabella dropped to the ground, covering her head as bullets flew overhead. The firefight lasted less than a minute, but it felt like hours. When silence finally fell, Marco was there, pulling her up, checking her for injuries. Are you hit? The baby? We're okay. We're okay. Isabella was shaking so hard she could barely stand. How did you know? Luca's had eyes on your father since the moment he got nervous about Castellano. We knew about the meeting. Marco was already moving her toward his car, hidden in the trees. When you left to see him, I followed. Good thing I did. The men, dead or running, doesn't matter. We need to get you somewhere safe before Castellano sends reinforcements. They drove in tense silence for 20 minutes before Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened, then handed it to Isabella. He wants to talk to you. Luca's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Are you hurt? No, scared, but not hurt. Isabella's hand pressed against her stomach, feeling for movement. The baby kicked, and relief flooded through her. Luca! I know. Marco told me everything. A pause. Why didn't you call me before going to see your father? I should have. I know I should have. You just what? Thought you could handle a meeting with a man Castellano was using as bait? His voice rose. You could have died, Isabella. Our son could have died. Do you understand that? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help me when I get a call that my wife is being ambushed on a back road. He took a shaky breath. Marco's taking you to a different location, somewhere Castellano doesn't know about. You'll stay there until this is over. How long will that be? As long as it takes. His tone softened slightly. I need to know you're safe so I can focus on ending this. Can you do that for me? Stay put and let me handle Castellano? Yes. Good. I'll come to you as soon as I can. I love you. I love you too. The line went dead. Isabella handed the phone back to Marco, who was watching her with sympathy. He'll get through this, Marco said. Luca always does. At what cost? Marco didn't answer. The new safe house was actually a compound, a sprawling estate in the Catskills with security that would make a military base jealous. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Cameras covered every angle. Isabella was shown to a suite of rooms that were luxurious but felt unmistakably like a prison. Mr. Moretti said to make you comfortable, the head of security explained. Anything you need, just ask. What she needed was her husband. What she needed was to stop being a liability that he had to protect while fighting a war. The days blurred together. Isabella tried to stay calm for the baby's sake, but anxiety gnawed at her constantly. Luca called twice a day, his conversations brief and carefully neutral. He never gave details about what he was doing, but she could hear the exhaustion creeping into his voice. A week after the ambush, Maria arrived with fresh clothes and groceries. Mr. Moretti sent me, the housekeeper explained, bustling around the kitchen. Said you'd be going stir-crazy by now. How is he? Maria's expression grew troubled. Tired, angry, determined. She paused in her unpacking. He's planning something big. I can always tell. He gets this look, like he's already made a decision and is just working out the details. What kind of decision? The kind that usually ends with someone not walking away. Maria touched Isabella's arm gently. But you shouldn't worry. He's doing this for you and the baby, to make sure you can have a normal life. Normal. The word felt absurd. Nothing about their life was normal. That night, Isabella lay in bed feeling her son move inside her, each flutter a reminder of what was at stake. She was 24 weeks pregnant now, visibly showing, her body changing to accommodate the life she carried. She thought about Luca's hands on her stomach, the wonder in his eyes when he felt the baby kick for the first time. The way he'd started talking to her belly, telling their son stories about the grandfather he'd never meet, about the world they were building for him. She thought about blood on his hands and the cold emptiness in his eyes after he'd killed to protect her. Two sides of the same man, gentle and violent, loving and dangerous. Her husband. The phone rang at midnight. Isabella grabbed it immediately. Luca? It's done. His voice was flat, emotionless. Castellano is dead. His organization is being absorbed by families that won't come after us. The threat is over. Relief and dread warred inside her. Are you okay? I will be. Once I see you. A pause. I'm coming to get you tomorrow. We're going home. What did you do? What I had to. He exhaled slowly. We'll talk about it when I get there. Get some rest, Cara. This is almost over. But when he hung up, Isabella couldn't sleep, because she knew with terrible certainty that whatever Luca had done to end Castellano, it had cost him something. She could hear it in his voice. The emptiness, the weariness, the price of keeping them safe. Luca arrived the next afternoon, and the moment Isabella saw him, her heart broke. He looked like he'd aged years in the 2 weeks since she'd seen him last. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His jaw was rough with stubble. He moved with the careful control of someone holding themselves together through sheer will. She ran to him anyway, throwing her arms around him despite her growing belly. Luca caught her, burying his face in her hair. I missed you, he breathed. Every second you were gone, I missed you. I'm here now. We're safe now. Are we? He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. I killed 11 people this week, Isabella. 11! Castellano and everyone close to him. I burned his operations to the ground and made it clear that coming after my family was a death sentence. You did what you had to do. Did I? Or did I prove that I'm exactly the monster everyone thinks I am? Isabella pressed her hands over his, holding them against her face. You're not a monster. You're a man protecting his family. There's not much difference sometimes. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I need to tell you something about what happened. About what I did. They sat together on a couch in the suite, Luca's arm around her shoulders, Isabella leaning against him. And he told her everything. How he'd tracked Castellano to a warehouse in Newark. How he'd walked in alone, unarmed, offering to negotiate. How Castellano had laughed and said the only negotiation was Luca giving up everything or watching his wife and child die. How Luca had smiled and triggered the explosive he'd planted in the building's foundation. I walked out, Luca said quietly, and the warehouse came down behind me. Castellano and 8 of his men died in the collapse. The other 3, the ones who'd organized the ambush on you, I handled personally afterward. Isabella absorbed this, trying to reconcile the gentle hands holding her with the violence he described. Are you horrified? Luca asked. I don't know what I am. She turned to look at him. You killed people. Lots of people. That should horrify me, but all I feel is grateful that you came home. That's not a healthy response, Kara. Probably not, but it's the truth. She took his hand, placing it on her stomach where their son was moving. Feel that. That's your child, our son. He exists because you protected us, however you had to do it. Luca's expression crumbled. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath shaky. I'm so tired, Isabella. Tired of the violence. Tired of having to be this person. I just want to take you home and be a normal husband preparing for his son's birth. Then let's do that. Let's go home and start over. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Isabella pulled back, forcing him to meet her eyes. You said the threat is over. Castellano is dead. You're transitioning to legitimate business, so let's actually do it. Let's leave this safe house and go home and start building the life we want. What if there are more threats? What if... Then we'll deal with them together. But I'm not living in fear anymore, Luca. I'm not hiding in safe houses while you fight wars to protect me. We're a family. We face things together. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he kissed her, deep and desperate, like she was air and he'd been drowning. Okay, he whispered against her lips. Together. No more separation. They went home the next day. The penthouse felt different somehow, brighter, safer, like the shadows had been cleared out along with the threat. Maria had prepared a welcome home dinner, and they ate together while Luca told her about the progress on his legitimate business ventures. The real estate development is moving forward. The tech investments are paying off. In 6 months, maybe less, my income will be entirely legal. He reached across the table for her hand. I'm keeping my word. Building something our son can be proud of. I'm already proud of you. Why? I'm a murderer who's trying to clean up his act. You're a father who's changing his entire life to give his child something better. That takes more courage than anything else you've done. Luca's eyes shone with emotion. How did I get so lucky? You married a woman desperate enough to say yes, and fell in love with her anyway. They finished dinner and moved to the couch. Isabella curled against Luca's side, his hand resting on her stomach. The baby kicked against his palm, and Luca smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. He's active tonight. He knows his father's home. Does he? Luca's voice was soft. I hope so. I hope he knows I'd do anything for him. For both of you. He'll know. We'll make sure of it. They sat in comfortable silence, the city glittering beyond the windows, their future finally starting to take shape. Isabella felt peaceful for the first time in weeks. Then she felt something else, a sensation in her belly that wasn't quite right. Not pain, but pressure. Tightness. Luca, her hand gripped his arm. Something's wrong. He was instantly alert. What kind of wrong? I don't know. It feels... The pressure increased, becoming unmistakably pain. Isabella gasped. We need to call the doctor. Luca already had his phone out, dialing. While he talked to the on-call physician, describing Isabella's symptoms, the pain worsened. By the time he hung up, she was doubled over. He said to go to the hospital, now. Luca scooped her up, carrying her toward the elevator. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. But Isabella could see the fear in his eyes, could feel her own terror rising as the pain came in waves. She was only 24 weeks pregnant. If the baby came now, no. She couldn't think about that. The hospital was a blur of emergency room procedures and concerned faces. A doctor performed an ultrasound while Isabella gripped Luca's hand hard enough to hurt. The baby's heartbeat is strong, the doctor said, but you're having contractions. We need to stop them before you go into active labor. It's too early, Isabella whispered. He's too small. We're going to do everything we can to keep him inside where he belongs. The doctor was already ordering medications, calling for specialists. Mrs. Moretti, you need to stay as calm as possible. Stress can make this worse. They admitted her overnight, pumping her full of drugs to stop the contractions. Luca never left her side, holding her hand through each wave of pain, his face pale but determined. This is my fault, he said as dawn broke outside the hospital windows. The stress of everything with Castellano, the ambush. Stop. Isabella squeezed his hand. This isn't anyone's fault. Sometimes these things just happen. But if I'd handled things differently, you handled things the only way you could, and we're going to be fine, all three of us. The medications worked. By morning, the contractions had stopped. The doctor put Isabella on strict bed rest for the next 2 weeks, monitoring for any signs of preterm labor. If you make it to 32 weeks, the baby's chances improve dramatically, the obstetrician explained. So our goal is keeping him cooking as long as possible. Luca took the restrictions seriously. He transformed their bedroom into a command center, setting up everything Isabella might need within arm's reach. He worked from home, conducting business from the sitting area while she rested. You don't have to hover, Isabella said on the third day of bed rest. I'm not hovering, I'm being attentive. You check on me every 15 minutes, so I'm thorough. He sat on the edge of the bed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Humor me, Cara. After almost losing you both, I need to make sure you're okay. She softened, taking his hand. We're okay. The baby's moving normally. I feel fine. Good. Let's keep it that way. The weeks of bed rest were challenging, but brought unexpected intimacy. Luca read to her, novels she loved, business books that made her laugh at his dramatic interpretations. They watched entire television series together, arguing good-naturedly about plot twists. He brought her meals Maria prepared and sat with her while she ate, telling her stories about his day. I had lunch with a venture capital firm today, he said one afternoon. They want to invest in the tech startup I've been developing. Could be huge if it works out. That's amazing. What's the startup? Security software, ironically enough. His smile was wry. Using my knowledge of criminal operations to help businesses protect themselves from cyber threats. That's actually brilliant. It's legal and profitable, which is all I care about. He stretched out beside her on the bed, careful not to jostle her. In 6 months, when our son is born, I want to be able to tell him his father is a legitimate businessman, not a crime lord trying to go straight. Isabella ran her fingers through his hair. You're already the man I want our son to know. The details are just details. The details include a body count. The details include a man who changed his entire life for his family. That's what matters. Luca caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I don't deserve you. Good thing you don't have to. You just have to love me. That's the easy part. At her 28-week checkup, the doctor gave them cautiously optimistic news. Everything looks stable. The baby's growing well. If you continue to have no contractions, we can ease some of the restrictions. The doctor smiled. You can start moving around the apartment. Short walks, gentle activity, but no stress, no heavy lifting, and at the first sign of pain, you call me immediately. The freedom felt enormous after weeks of confinement. Isabella walked through the penthouse like she was exploring new territory, marveling at how different everything looked after being confined to the bedroom. She ended up in the room they'd designated as the nursery. It was still empty, waiting to be furnished. They'd been too nervous to prepare it fully before, superstitious about jinxing things. Luca found her there, standing in the center of the empty room with her hands on her swollen belly. What are you thinking? He asked, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her. That we should start getting ready, buying furniture, picking out colors, making this real. She leaned back against him. I was afraid before, afraid something would go wrong, but I think we're going to make it, all three of us. We are. Luca's hands covered hers on her stomach. And you're right, we should start preparing, making this place ready for our son. They spent the next week slowly transforming the nursery. Isabella directed from a comfortable chair while Luca assembled furniture, painted walls, a soft gray-blue, hung curtains. Maria helped with the details: bedding, toys, tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small. "He's going to be here before we know it," Maria said, folding onesies into drawers. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Isabella admitted. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I don't know what to do?" "Then you figure it out, same as every other parent in history." Maria smiled. "You're going to be wonderful, both of you." At 32 weeks, they reached the milestone the doctor had emphasized. The baby's chances of surviving, if born early, jumped dramatically. Isabella felt some of the constant anxiety ease. "We're going to make it," she told Luca that night. "Really make it." "Of course we are." He was sprawled beside her on the bed, his hand tracing patterns on her belly. "This kid's too stubborn to come early. He gets that from you." "From me? You're the most stubborn person I know. Determined, not stubborn." "Uh-huh. Keep telling yourself that." They laughed together, easy and comfortable in a way that felt miraculous given everything they'd been through. This was what Isabella had hoped for when she'd first signed those papers. Not love, not intimacy, but peace, safety. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found all of it. The baby kicked hard enough that Luca felt it against his hand. Did he just kick me? He's been doing that all day, very active. He's probably running out of room in there. Luca shifted to press his ear against her belly. "Hey kid, your dad here. I know it's getting cramped, but you need to stay put for a few more weeks. Give your mom and me time to finish getting ready for you." Isabella ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who talked to their unborn son with such tenderness. "He's lucky to have you as a father. I hope I don't mess it up." "You won't. You can't know that." "Yes, I can, because you're already worrying about it. Bad fathers don't worry." She tugged gently until he looked up at her. "You're going to be amazing, Luca. Our son is going to grow up knowing he's loved and protected and cherished. That's what matters." Something in his expression shifted, vulnerability mixed with determination. "I'm going to tell him the truth someday, about who I was, what I did. I don't want him to find out from someone else. When he's old enough to understand." When he's old enough to understand. Luca moved back up to kiss her softly. "But for now, I just want to enjoy this. You, me, and the family we're building." "Me too." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, their son moving between them, the future spreading out with possibility. At 36 weeks, Isabella's water broke. She was in the kitchen with Maria, discussing dinner options, when she felt the sudden gush. For a moment, she just stared at the puddle forming at her feet. "Mrs. Moretti?" Maria's voice seemed to come from far away. "Isabella, honey, are you— Oh dear. I think—" Isabella gripped the counter. "I think the baby's coming." Maria was already moving, grabbing her phone, calling Luca. "Mr. Moretti? It's time. Her water just broke." "Yes, we're heading to the hospital now." Luca burst through the door 10 minutes later, breathless and pale. "Are you okay? Is it really—" "It's really happening." Isabella tried to smile through the first contraction. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Okay, let's get you to the hospital." The labor was long, 18 hours of contractions that built and built until Isabella thought she couldn't take any more. Luca stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement when she screamed that she couldn't do this. "You can," he insisted. "You're the strongest person I know. You've survived my world, my violence, my mistakes. You can do this." "I hate you right now," she panted between contractions. "I know. You can hate me all you want after our son is here." Finally, after hours that felt like days, the doctor said the words Isabella had been desperate to hear. "It's time to push." Everything narrowed to that singular focus, pushing through the pain, following the doctor's instructions, Luca's voice in her ear telling her she was doing great. She was almost there, just a little more. And then, a cry. Sharp and indignant, and the most beautiful sound Isabella had ever heard. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. lifting a small, squirming, perfect baby into view. Congratulations. They placed him on Isabella's chest, and she looked down at her son, with his dark hair and tiny fists and eyes that blinked open to reveal deep brown irises that would probably darken to match his father's. "Hi," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby. We've been waiting for you." Luca was crying too, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He's perfect. Isabella, he's perfect." "He is." She looked up at her husband, seeing the wonder and love and fear in his expression. "We did it. You did it. I just held your hand. You did more than that." Isabella shifted slightly, making room. "Do you want to hold your son?" The nurse helped transfer the baby to Luca's arms. He held the infant like he was made of glass, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of such profound love that Isabella's heart ached. "Hey, kid," Luca said softly. "I'm your dad, and I promise you, I swear to you, I'm going to give you the life you deserve. You're never going to have to be afraid. You're never going to wonder if you're loved, and you're never going to see the darkness I came from. That's my promise to you." The baby yawned, completely unconcerned with the vow being made. Isabella watched them together, her dangerous husband holding their innocent son, and felt the last pieces of her heart settle into place. This was her family, built from obligation and debt and circumstances neither of them would have chosen. But somehow, impossibly, it had become real. They named him Alessandro, after Luca's grandfather, a man who'd apparently been kind where Luca's father had been cruel, gentle where others in the family had been violent. "He taught me that strength didn't have to mean brutality," Luca explained as they filled out the birth certificate paperwork. "That you could be powerful and still have a heart. I want our son to know that's possible." Alessandro Marco Moretti. The name looked official on paper, permanent in a way that made Isabella's chest tight with emotion. This was real. This tiny human sleeping in the bassinet beside her hospital bed was theirs, depending on them for everything. The responsibility was terrifying. "What if I mess this up?" Isabella whispered that first night, watching Alessandro sleep. "What if I'm a terrible mother?" Luca was sprawled in the chair beside her bed, exhausted but unable to stop staring at their son. "You won't be. Look at him. He's already crazy about you. He's 2 hours old. He doesn't know enough to have opinions yet. He knows his mother's voice. Watch." Luca gently lifted the sleeping baby, bringing him to Isabella. The moment Alessandro settled against her chest, his fussing stopped, his tiny body relaxing completely. "See?" Luca's voice was soft with wonder. "He knows where he belongs." The first weeks home were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Alessandro had strong opinions about everything: when he wanted to eat, how he wanted to be held, the exact temperature his bathwater should be. Isabella and Luca stumbled through it together, learning as they went. "I don't think I'm doing this right," Luca said one night at 3 a.m, trying to soothe a crying Alessandro while Isabella pumped. "He won't stop crying. Try the bounce thing. He likes when you walk and bounce at the same time." Luca started moving, adding a gentle bounce to his steps. Alessandro's cries gradually subsided into hiccups, then silence. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't, but Maria said babies like movement because it reminds them of being in the womb." Isabella finished pumping, coming to stand beside him. "You're doing great, by the way." "I feel like I'm constantly on the edge of breaking him." "He's tougher than he looks. He'd have to be, with us as parents." Luca smiled at that, still swaying gently with their son against his shoulder. "We're a mess, aren't we?" "The best kind of mess." Maria was invaluable those first weeks, appearing with meals and wisdom and the calm competence of someone who'd raised children before. She showed Isabella how to swaddle Alessandro properly, taught Luca the right way to support a newborn's head, and took night shifts when they were both too exhausted to function. "You're saving our lives," Isabella told her one morning, "just helping you find your feet." Maria smiled, rocking Alessandro in her experienced arms. "You'll get the hang of it. Every parent does." Isabella's father visited when Alessandro was 2 weeks old. Marco Marino stood in the nursery doorway, looking older and smaller than ever, his hands shaking as he watched Luca change their son's diaper. "He's beautiful," Marco said quietly. "Looks like you, Bella." He has Luca's eyes. Isabella came to stand beside her father. Do you want to hold him? I'm not sure I should. Papa, he's your grandson. Of course you should hold him. Luca carefully transferred the baby to Marco's arms. The older man held Alessandro like he was made of porcelain, tears streaming down his weathered face. I'm sorry, Marco whispered, for everything I put you through, every mistake I made that led you here. Those mistakes gave me this, Isabella said, gesturing to Luca, to Alessandro, to the life they'd built. So maybe they weren't entirely bad. You're too forgiving. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned that holding on to anger takes too much energy. She touched her father's arm gently. You're sober now. You're trying. That's what matters. Marco had indeed gotten sober after the incident with Castellano, shaken enough by how close he'd come to getting his daughter killed that he'd finally committed to recovery. Luca had quietly paid for the rehab facility, never mentioning it to Isabella until Maria let it slip. Why didn't you tell me? Isabella had asked. Because it wasn't for you. It was for him. Luca had shrugged. He's your father, and he's Alessandro's grandfather. I'd like our son to have one grandparent who's actually present in his life. Now, watching her father hold her son with such tenderness, Isabella felt grateful for Luca's quiet generosity, for the man he'd become despite everything working against him. Alessandro thrived. At 6 weeks, he started smiling, real smiles that lit up his whole face. At 8 weeks, he began tracking movement with his eyes, watching his parents with the intense focus of someone learning the world. At 3 months, he laughed for the first time at Luca making ridiculous faces, and the sound was so pure and joyful that both parents ended up in tears. I never knew, Luca said that night after Alessandro was asleep. I never knew I could love something this much, that it could feel like this. Isabella curled against him on the couch, exhausted but content. Like what? Like my heart is walking around outside my body. Like I'd burn the world down to keep him safe. Like everything I've ever done in my life was leading to this moment. He paused. Is that crazy? If it is, we're both crazy, because I feel exactly the same way. Life settled into a new rhythm. Luca worked from home most days, conducting business from his office while being available when Alessandro needed him. The legitimate businesses were thriving. The real estate development had broken ground. The tech startup had secured major funding. The investment portfolio was performing better than projected. I'm making more money legally than I ever did illegally, Luca told her one evening, reviewing financial statements. And I can sleep at night knowing none of it came from hurting people. I'm proud of you. Are you? Even knowing what it took to get here? Especially knowing that. Isabella came to sit on his lap, careful not to disturb the paperwork. You changed your entire life, Luca. You walked away from power and control and everything you knew because you wanted something better for us. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing some days, like I'm still the same person, just better at hiding it. You're not, though. The man I married wouldn't have read goodnight stories to his son, wouldn't have taken midnight feedings without complaint, wouldn't have transformed this penthouse into a home. She kissed him softly. You're different. Better. Whether you believe it or not. Luca pulled her closer, burying his face in her neck. I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to be the man you think I am. You already are. You just can't see it yet. When Alessandro was 4 months old, Isabella woke in the middle of the night to find Luca's side of the bed empty. She found him in the nursery standing over Alessandro's crib, watching their son sleep with an expression she couldn't quite read. Luca, what's wrong? He didn't turn around. I got a call tonight from someone I used to work with. They want me back in. Isabella's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That I'm out, that I'm not interested. He finally looked at her, his face shadowed in the dim nightlight glow. But they're not taking no for an answer. They think I owe them, that I can't just walk away from everything we built together. Who is it? Antonio Russo. He ran the Eastern Territories while I controlled the South. We worked together for years. Luca's hands gripped the crib rail. He's calling in old debts, saying I owe him for contracts he lost when I went legitimate. Do you? Owe him? Technically, yes. When I pulled out, it created a power vacuum. Other families moved in on territories we'd controlled jointly. Antonio lost ground because of my decisions. He ran a hand through his hair. But I also saved his life twice and gave him opportunities he never would have had otherwise. So ethically, I don't think I owe him anything. What does he want? For me to come back, help him reclaim what was lost. Use my connections and reputation to rebuild. Luca's laugh was bitter. He doesn't understand that those connections are exactly what I'm trying to leave behind. Isabella moved to stand beside him, looking down at Alessandro's sleeping face. Their son was beautiful in the half-light, peaceful and innocent, completely unaware of the complications surrounding his existence. What are you going to do? Tell him no again. More firmly this time. Luca's jaw tightened. And if he doesn't listen, I'll make it clear that threats against my family will be handled the same way Castellanos were. Luca, I know I said I was done with violence, but I won't let anyone threaten what we've built. He looked at her, his eyes dark and serious. I need you to understand that. If it comes down to protecting you and Alessandro or staying clean, I'm choosing you every time. I don't want you to have to make that choice. Neither do I. But if Russo forces my hand... He didn't finish the sentence. Isabella took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Then we'll deal with it. Together. Like we've dealt with everything else. I'm supposed to be past this. Past the threats and the violence and the constant looking over my shoulder. Maybe that's not realistic. Maybe the past doesn't let go that easily. She squeezed his hand. But we're stronger now than we were. We have more to fight for. And we have each other. Luca pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly while Alessandro slept peacefully nearby. I love you, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too, and we're going to get through this. But over the next weeks, it became clear that Antonio Russo wasn't backing down. The phone calls continued, each one more insistent than the last. Then came the messages, photos of Isabella and Alessandro on their morning walks in Central Park, surveillance images that made it clear they were being watched. He's trying to intimidate me, Luca said grimly, studying the latest photo. Show me he can get to you whenever he wants. Is it working? Absolutely. But not the way he thinks. Luca's expression was cold, controlled. He's reminding me exactly how ruthless I can be when someone threatens my family. What are you going to do? Meet with him, face to face. Make it clear that this ends now, one way or another. Isabella's hands twisted together. What if it's a trap? Then I'll handle it. Luca, I won't let him hurt you, Isabella, or Alessandro. I don't care what I have to do. He cupped her face gently. I need you to trust me on this. I do trust you. That's not the problem. The problem is I don't trust him. Neither do I, which is why I'm bringing Marco and enough security to start a small war. He kissed her forehead. This will be over soon, I promise. The meeting was set for a restaurant Russo controlled in Little Italy. Luca left on a Tuesday evening, dressed in the dark suit that made him look dangerous and powerful, every inch the crime boss he'd been trying to leave behind. Isabella watched him go with dread coiling in her stomach. Alessandro fussed in her arms, picking up on her tension. It's okay, she murmured to him. Papa's going to be fine. He always is. But the hours crawled by with no word. 8 o'clock became 9, then 10. Isabella tried to stay calm, feeding Alessandro and putting him to bed, going through the familiar routines. But her hands shook as she changed his diaper, her mind conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios. At 11, her phone finally rang. Luca? It's handled. His voice was flat, exhausted. Russo won't be a problem anymore. What does that mean? What happened? I made him an offer. Gave him the option to walk away with his life and enough money to rebuild somewhere else, or stay and face the consequences of threatening my family. And? He took the money. He's leaving New York, permanently. A pause. There were some threats, some posturing, but in the end he understood that I'm not the same man I was, that I'm willing to do worse things now than I ever did before, because the stakes are higher. Isabella sank onto the couch, relief flooding through her. Are you okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, he sighed. I'll be home soon. We can talk about it then. When Luca arrived an hour later, he looked like he'd aged years. He went straight to Alessandro's room, standing over the crib for long minutes before finally coming to find Isabella in their bedroom. "I paid him $2 million to disappear," Luca said without preamble. $2 million of my own money to make a problem go away without violence. That's good, though. That's the right choice. Is it? Or is it just showing weakness? Proving that I can be bought off? That threats work if you push hard enough? He sat heavily on the bed. I keep second-guessing myself, wondering if my father would have just killed Russo and been done with it, if that's what I should have done. Isabella knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "Your father isn't here, and you're not him. You made a choice that keeps our family safe without adding to the body count. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. What if more people come? More old associates who think I owe them something? Then we'll deal with them too, together, however we have to." She met his eyes steadily. "But you can't live in fear of what might happen, Luca. You'll drive yourself crazy." "I already feel crazy, like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to come after what's mine. That's trauma, from years of living that life. It doesn't just go away because you want it to." Isabella squeezed his hands. "Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist who specializes in what? Recovering crime lords?" His laugh was bitter. "In trauma, in processing violence, in learning to live with the choices you've made." She paused. "You've changed your entire life, Luca, but you haven't dealt with the emotional aftermath of everything you've done, everything you've seen." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I dream about them sometimes, the people I've killed. They're standing over Alessandro's crib, and I can't stop them because my hands are covered in their blood." Isabella's heart broke at the rawness in his voice. "When did these dreams start?" "After Alessandro was born, after I held him for the first time and realized what I'd brought him into." Luca's voice cracked. "I wanted to give him a clean slate, a fresh start. But how can I do that when I'm carrying around all this darkness?" "By acknowledging it, by working through it, by not letting it define you anymore." She climbed onto the bed beside him, pulling him down to lie with his head in her lap. "You're not your past, Luca. You're not the sum of the things you've done. You're a good father, a good husband, a good man who made bad choices and is trying to make better ones now." "I don't feel like a good man." "That's because you're holding yourself to an impossible standard. Nobody's perfect. Nobody gets through life without regrets." Her fingers combed through his hair gently. "But you're trying. You're changing. That's what matters." They lay together in the darkness, holding each other while their son slept down the hall, safe and loved despite the complications of his parents' past. The next day, Luca made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in trauma and moral injury. Isabella didn't ask what they discussed in those sessions. That was private, his to share if he wanted, but she noticed subtle changes over the following weeks. He slept better. The haunted look in his eyes began to fade. He laughed more easily with Alessandro, played without the constant undercurrent of tension. "It helps," he told her one night, talking about it, processing all the things I've tried to bury. "I'm glad." She asked me today what I want my son to know about me when he's older, what story I want to tell him about who I was and who I became. "What did you say?" "That I want to tell him the truth, all of it, not to glorify what I did, but not to hide from it either." Luca's expression was thoughtful. "I want Alessandro to know that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define you, that choosing to be better is always possible, even when it's hard." Yes, Isabella smiled, blinking back tears. "That's a good story." "It's our story." Alessandro's first birthday approached faster than either of them could believe. The tiny newborn had transformed into a curious, active baby who was constantly trying to pull himself up on furniture, babbling in a language only he understood, and charming everyone he met. "Where did the time go?" Isabella asked, watching Alessandro demolish a small cake Maria had made for the occasion. Their son had frosting in his hair, on his face, all over his hands, and looked absolutely delighted with himself. "I don't know, but I want it to slow down." Luca captured a photo on his phone, grinning. At this rate, he'll be graduating college next week. The party was small, just family and close friends. Marco was there, visibly emotional, as he watched his grandson play. Maria had outdone herself with decorations. Even Marco, Luca's second in command, had shown up with a ridiculously oversized stuffed bear. You know he can't even hold that thing yet, right? Luca said, eyeing the bear. Marco shrugged. He'll grow into it. Besides, every kid needs a bear bigger than they are. It's tradition. Isabella watched the celebration with a full heart. This was family, messy and imperfect and built from unlikely pieces, but family nonetheless. Her father, sober and trying. Maria, who'd become more grandmother than housekeeper. Marco, the dangerous man who never failed to be gentle with Alessandro. And Luca, who'd transformed from the cold stranger she'd married into the man she couldn't imagine living without. After everyone left and Alessandro was finally asleep, exhausted from excitement and sugar, Isabella and Luca collapsed on the couch together. We did it, she said. A whole year of parenting, and we haven't completely destroyed him. Yet, there's still time. Luca pulled her against his side. But seriously, I'm proud of us. We figured it out. We had help. We had each other. That's what mattered. Isabella tilted her head to look at him. Are you happy? Really happy? Happier than I've ever been. Happier than I thought I was capable of being. He kissed her softly. Are you? Yes. Even with all the complications in the past and the constant worry that something will go wrong, yes, I'm happy. Good, because I plan on keeping you this happy for the next 60 years or so. Only 60? Okay, 70. But I'm not making any promises after that. They laughed together, and Alessandro stirred in his sleep down the hall, and the city lights glittered beyond the windows, and everything felt right in a way Isabella had stopped believing was possible. But life, as always, had other plans. 2 weeks after Alessandro's birthday, Isabella started feeling unwell, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted by mid-afternoon, emotional over the smallest things. At first, she blamed it on a stomach bug, then on stress, then on lack of sleep. Maria was the one who finally connected the dots. Mrs. Moretti, the housekeeper said gently one morning, finding Isabella dry heaving over the kitchen sink. When was your last period? Isabella's mind went blank. Between caring for Alessandro and managing the household and everything else, she hadn't been paying attention to her cycle. When was the last time? Oh, I think I need to take a test, she said faintly. An hour later, she was staring at 2 pink lines, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the test. Pregnant. Again. Alessandro was barely a year old. They'd been careful, mostly careful, but apparently not careful enough. Isabella pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to process this information. Another baby. Another child to love and protect and raise in this complicated life they'd built. Terror and joy warred inside her in equal measure. Isabella! Luca's voice came from the bedroom. Are you okay? Maria said you were sick. She emerged from the bathroom, test still in her hand. Luca took one look at her face, then at what she was holding, and went very still. Is that positive? She held it out to him. We're pregnant again. For a long moment, Luca just stared at the test. Then a slow smile spread across his face, pure, uncomplicated joy. We're having another baby. You're not upset? Upset? Isabella, this is... He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. This is amazing, overwhelming and terrifying and amazing. We have a 1-year-old. We're barely keeping our heads above water with 1 baby. Then we'll figure out how to manage with 2, same way we figured out everything else. He set her down gently, his hand moving to her still flat stomach. When? I don't know yet. I need to see the doctor, but based on symptoms, maybe 8 weeks? So we'll have an almost 2-year-old and a newborn. Luca laughed, slightly hysterical. We're going to need a bigger apartment. Or a house, with a yard, somewhere Alessandro can run around. A house. He considered this. In the suburbs? Maybe. Is that too normal for you? Normal sounds perfect. Luca kissed her softly. A house in the suburbs with a yard and a white picket fence and absolutely nothing illegal happening anywhere near it. That's exactly what I want. They stood together in the bathroom, hands linked over her stomach where their second child grew, and Isabella felt the future reshaping itself once again. More complicated, more terrifying, more full of love than she'd ever imagined possible. Are we crazy? She asked. Probably, but we've been crazy from the start. Might as well commit to it. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy 2 weeks later. 8 weeks along, due in early autumn. Everything looked healthy and normal. This time, the news felt less terrifying and more like a gift, proof that they were building something real, something lasting. They told Alessandro first, though at 13 months he had no idea what they were talking about. You're going to be a big brother, Luca told him seriously. That means you'll have to help us take care of the baby. Show them how to be brave and strong like you. Alessandro babbled something incomprehensible and tried to eat the ultrasound photo. I think that's approval, Isabella said, rescuing the picture. Definitely approval. They shared the news with family next. Marco cried again, happy tears this time. Maria immediately started planning, talking about converting the guest room into a second nursery. Even Marco, Luca's second-in-command, sent a congratulatory bottle of wine with a note that read, "For after the baby comes, you're going to need it." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Isabella was less anxious this time, more confident in her body's ability to carry a child to term. Luca was attentive but not hovering, having learned from the first pregnancy when to help and when to give her space. At the 20-week ultrasound, they learned they were having another boy. Brothers? Luca said, staring at the screen with wonder. Alessandro's going to have a brother. Are you disappointed that it's not a girl? Are you kidding? I'm thrilled. I know how to do boys now. Girls would require a whole new skill set. He squeezed her hand. 2 sons. I can't believe how lucky we are. They started preparing for the second baby's arrival. The penthouse, which had felt enormous when Isabella first arrived, now felt cramped with baby equipment and toys scattered everywhere. Luca started seriously looking at houses, dragging Isabella to open houses in Westchester and Connecticut on weekends. What about this one? He asked one Saturday, showing her a colonial with a wraparound porch and a huge backyard. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths on a quiet street with good schools nearby. It's beautiful. Can we afford it? Cara, we can afford 10 of these. The question is whether you like it. Isabella walked through the empty rooms, imagining their family filling this space, Alessandro running through the halls, the new baby learning to crawl on these hardwood floors, family dinners in the big kitchen, lazy Sundays in the backyard. I love it, she said finally. It feels like home. They made an offer that day. By the time Isabella was 30 weeks pregnant, they owned a house in the suburbs. Everything she'd never let herself dream about when she first signed those papers to become Luca Moretti's wife. Moving happened quickly. Luca hired professionals to pack everything, but Isabella still found herself overwhelmed by the sheer amount of stuff they'd accumulated. Baby clothes and toys and books and furniture and all the detritus of a life fully lived. How did we get so much in just 2 years, she asked, sorting through Alessandro's outgrown clothes. We built a family. Families accumulate things. Luca appeared with another box. Besides, most of this is Maria's doing. She can't resist buying things for Alessandro. She's going to be even worse with the new baby. I'm counting on it. They spent their last night in the penthouse surrounded by boxes. Alessandro, asleep in his crib one final time. Isabella stood at the windows, looking out over the city she'd come to love. Are you sad to leave? Luca asked, coming to stand beside her. A little. This is where we started, where we fell in love, where Alessandro was born. She leaned against him. But I'm excited too, for the next chapter. Me too. His hand rested on her swollen belly, ready for whatever comes next. The house in Westchester became home faster than Isabella expected. Alessandro loved having a yard to explore, spending hours toddling around on the grass, examining every leaf and rock with intense focus. The neighborhood was quiet, safe, full of young families who welcomed them warmly. It's so normal, Isabella marveled one evening, watching Luca push Alessandro on the swing set they'd installed in the backyard. We're just a regular family in the suburbs. Is that disappointing? It's perfect. At 36 weeks, during a routine checkup, the doctor frowned at the ultrasound screen. Mrs. Moretti, I'm seeing something unexpected here. Isabella's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Is the baby okay? The baby's fine. Babies, actually. The doctor turned the screen toward her. You're having twins. The world seemed to tilt. What? Twins. I'm not sure how we missed it in earlier scans. Sometimes one baby hides behind the other, but there are definitely two heartbeats here. Two healthy baby boys. Isabella couldn't breathe. Two babies. Congratulations, though I imagine this comes as quite a shock. The doctor smiled sympathetically. The good news is both babies look healthy and are measuring right on track. The challenging news is we'll need to monitor you more closely and possibly deliver early to minimize risks. Isabella barely heard the rest of the appointment. Her mind was stuck on that one word. Twins. Not one new baby. Two. 3 children under 2 years old. She was going to need so much help. Luca took the news with surprising calm, though his face went pale when she told him. Twins, he repeated. Twins. So we're going to have 3 children. 3 boys, specifically. He sat down heavily on the couch. Okay, we can handle this. People have twins all the time. It's just 2 babies at once. Double the diapers, double the feeding, double the everything. Are you freaking out? Completely. You? Completely. Isabella sat beside him. But we'll figure it out, same way we figured out everything else. We're going to need more help, live-in help, probably. Maria already offered to move into the guest room. Of course she did. Luca laughed, slightly hysterical. 3 boys. We're going to have 3 sons. Are you okay with that? Really? He turned to look at her, and despite the shock in his eyes, she saw wonder there too. I'm terrified and overwhelmed. And completely unprepared. But yeah, I'm okay with it. Better than okay. His hand found hers. We're building something incredible here, Isabella. A family. A real family. That's worth any amount of chaos. The twins were born at 37 weeks via scheduled C-section, both healthy and screaming. Marco and Dante, named for Luca's second-in-command and Isabella's favorite poet. They were identical, with the same dark hair and eyes as their father and older brother, but with distinct personalities from day one. Marco was calm, watchful, content to observe the world around him. Dante was active, demanding, making his preferences known loudly and often. It's like having 2 completely different babies, Isabella marveled during one marathon feeding session, nursing both twins while Luca entertained Alessandro. 3 completely different babies, Luca corrected. Alessandro's nothing like either of them. Life became controlled chaos. 3 boys under 2 required military-level organization and more hands than Isabella and Luca had between them. Maria moved in permanently, taking over the guest room and becoming an indispensable third parent. Marco, Luca's friend, not the baby, stopped by frequently to help, his dangerous exterior hiding a surprising gentleness with children. You're good at this, Isabella told him one afternoon, watching him effortlessly soothe a fussy Dante. Marco shrugged. Had younger siblings growing up. You learn quick when you're the oldest of 6. 6? And you still voluntarily spend time around babies? These particular babies? Yeah, they're family. That word again. Family. It had expanded beyond anything Isabella could have imagined 2 years ago. Not just her and Luca and their children, but Maria and Marco and her father, all woven together into something messy and imperfect and utterly precious. The house was always noisy now, babies crying, Alessandro's toddler chatter, adults moving through their routines. It was exhausting and overwhelming, and nothing like the quiet, controlled life Isabella had imagined having. It was perfect. On a quiet morning when the twins were 3 months old, Isabella woke to find Luca already awake, sitting by the window with Marco, the baby, not the man, in his arms. Couldn't sleep? She asked softly. Wanted to think. He looked down at the infant in his arms. 3 sons. We have 3 sons, Isabella. I know. I was there when they were born. That's not what I mean. He turned to face her. I keep thinking about the man I was when we met, the life I was living, the things I was willing to do. His voice dropped. And then I look at them, at our boys, and I can't believe I get to be their father, that I get to be the person who teaches them about the world. It feels like more than I deserve. Isabella moved to sit beside him, careful not to wake the sleeping baby. You're exactly the father they need, the father they deserve. How can you be so sure? Because you love them. Because you changed everything about your life to give them something better. Because even when you're exhausted and overwhelmed, you show up. She took his free hand. That's what being a good parent is, Luca. Not being perfect, just being present. He was quiet for a moment, then, I want to propose to you again. Isabella blinked. We're already married, twice. I know, but I want to do it right this time. Not because of debt or obligation or arrangements, just because I love you and I want to choose you consciously and deliberately every single day for the rest of my life. Tears pricked her eyes. You already do that. Then let me make it official. Let me give you the proposal you deserved the first time. He shifted baby Marco to one arm, reaching into his pocket with the other. He pulled out a small box. Isabella Moretti, will you marry me? Again, for real this time? She opened the box to find a stunning ring, simple, elegant, perfect. Nothing like the ostentatious jewelry she'd expected from a man of Luca's wealth. Just a beautiful symbol of a love that had grown from the most unlikely soil. Yes, she whispered. Always yes. They planned the ceremony for a Saturday in June when the twins were 6 months old and Alessandro had just turned 2. Nothing elaborate, just their backyard transformed with white chairs and flowers, an arch covered in climbing roses, and the people who mattered most. Isabella wore a simple cream dress that flowed around her still recovering body, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked nothing like the frightened woman who'd signed papers in that law office 3 years ago, and everything like the person she'd become, confident, loved, home. Luca stood under the arch in a charcoal suit, Alessandro clinging to his leg while Maria held the twins in the front row. When he saw Isabella walking toward him, his expression transformed into something so tender it made her breath catch. Hi, she said when she reached him, unable to stop smiling. Hi yourself. He took her hands, and Alessandro immediately demanded, Mama up. In a minute, sweetheart, Isabella promised, but Luca was already bending to lift their oldest son between them. We're all in this together, he said. Might as well make it official. The officiant smiled. Shall we begin? The vows they'd written were simple. Luca spoke first, his voice steady, despite the emotion shining in his eyes. Isabella, 3 years ago you saved my life by agreeing to marry me, though neither of us knew it at the time. You saw past the monster I thought I was and found the man I could become. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to be better than everything I'd been taught. I promised to love you fiercely and gently, to be the partner you deserve, to build this life with you, day by day, for as long as we both shall live. Isabella's throat was tight with tears, but she managed her own vows. Luca, you asked me to marry you to settle a debt. I said yes to save my father, but somewhere between obligation and choice, we found love. You showed me that people can change, that darkness doesn't have to be permanent, that sometimes the best things grow from the hardest soil. I choose you, today and every day. In this life we're building together. They exchanged rings, new ones, chosen together, symbols of this second beginning. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife again, Luca kissed her thoroughly, while Alessandro giggled between them, and their guests cheered. I love you, Mrs. Moretti, Luca murmured against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Moretti. Again and always. The reception was perfect chaos. Alessandro ran wild with sugar-fueled energy while the twins passed between family members who couldn't get enough of them. Isabella's father gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about second chances and redemption and the miracle of watching his daughter build something beautiful from ashes. To my Bella, Marco said, raising his glass with shaking hands that had been sober for over a year now, who taught me that it's never too late to change, and to Luca, who loved her enough to become a different man. May you both have the life you've earned, Maria cried openly. Marco, Luca's second in command, looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Even the twins seemed to understand something special was happening, their wide eyes tracking the celebration around them. As the sun set and fairy lights illuminated the garden, Luca pulled Isabella onto the makeshift dance floor. They swayed together to music that drifted through the warm evening air, their children playing nearby, their future stretching out with possibility. Happy? Luca asked, his lips near her ear. Deliriously. You? More than I ever thought possible. He pulled back to look at her. Thank you. For what? For seeing who I could be, for giving me a reason to become that person, for this family, this life, this second chance I didn't deserve but somehow got anyway. Isabella reached up to cup his face. You deserved it, Luca. You just didn't know it yet. They danced until Alessandro crashed from exhaustion and the twins needed feeding. They said goodbye to their guests and carried their sleeping children inside, moving through the familiar routines of bedtime with the ease of parents who'd learned through trial and error and stubborn love. Later, lying in bed with Luca's arms around her, Isabella thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fear and anger of those first days, the slow thaw as walls came down, the terror of pregnancy and threats and learning to love someone dangerous, the overwhelming joy of holding their sons, the daily choice to keep building, keep trying, keep loving despite everything working against them. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Marrying me. Getting trapped in this domestic life when you could have had power and control and everything you'd built? Luca tightened his arms around her. Not for a single second. This, you, our boys, this house, this life, this is more valuable than any empire I could have ruled. This is real power, the kind that lasts. That's very philosophical of you. I have a good therapist. She's teaching me things. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, I have you to keep me grounded, to remind me what actually matters. And what's that? Being present for the first time our sons say Papa, teaching them to ride bikes, reading bedtime stories, growing old with the woman I love. He paused. The small things that turn out to be everything. Isabella smiled in the darkness, her heart so full it ached. I love you, Luca Moretti. I love you too, Isabella Moretti. Thank you for marrying me. Twice. Thank you for becoming someone worth marrying twice. They fell asleep tangled together, the baby monitor crackling softly on the nightstand, their children breathing in sleep down the hall, their improbable family whole and safe and home. The months that followed were demanding but joyful. Alessandro grew into a confident toddler with strong opinions about everything. The twins developed distinct personalities. Marco remained calm and observant, while Dante was energetic and outgoing. They learned to crawl, then walk, turning the house into an obstacle course of baby gates and padded corners. Luca's legitimate businesses continued to thrive. The real estate development won awards. The tech startup went public, making them wealthier than Isabella could process. But Luca stayed grounded, splitting his time between work and family, never missing bedtime stories or weekend park visits. I used to think power meant controlling territories and commanding fear, he told Isabella one Sunday afternoon while they watched their boys play in the backyard. Now I know it means being the person your kids run to when they're hurt. Being the man your wife trusts completely. Building something that lasts beyond you. Look at you getting all profound. I'm a work in progress. He pulled her closer on the porch swing. But I'm working toward the right things now. Isabella had started her bookstore, a cozy shop in downtown Westchester filled with carefully curated titles and comfortable reading nooks. It wasn't profitable yet, might never be, but it fed something in her soul that had been hungry since she'd abandoned her art history degree to care for her father. This makes me happy, she told Luca one evening after closing, standing in her shop surrounded by books and possibilities. Really, truly happy. Good. You deserve to have something that's just yours. He handed her a cup of coffee, looking around the space with pride. You've built something beautiful here. We've built something beautiful everywhere. She gestured vaguely, meaning the shop, the house, their family, their life. All of it, together. Together, Luca agreed, pulling her close. That's the only way it works. When Alessandro was 3 and the twins were 18 months old, Isabella's father collapsed at his apartment. The call came at 2 a.m. Marco Marino had been rushed to the hospital with a heart attack. They found him in the ICU, tubes and monitors transforming him into something fragile and breakable. The doctor's prognosis was grave, significant damage to his heart, complicated by years of alcohol abuse and neglect. I'm sorry, Marco whispered when Isabella sat beside his bed. His hand in hers felt like paper, insubstantial. For everything I put you through, every mistake I made. Papa, don't let me say it while I still can. He coughed, wincing with pain. I destroyed our family with my gambling. I sold your future to pay my debts. I was a terrible father and an even worse man. You were sick, addicted. That's not the same as being terrible, isn't it? His eyes were wet. I've been sober a year, Bella. 1 year out of a lifetime of mistakes. That doesn't erase anything. Isabella squeezed his hand carefully. No, but it means you tried. You're still trying. That counts for something. I want my grandsons to remember me as the man I became, not the one I was. He looked at her with desperate hope. Is that possible? Can people really change that much? She thought of Luca, the cold stranger she'd married transformed into the loving father reading bedtime stories in their suburban home. The man who'd killed to protect his family, now building playgrounds and attending PTA meetings. Yes, she said firmly. People can change. You're proof of that. Marco survived the heart attack but remained fragile. Luca arranged for him to move into a cottage on their property, close enough for family, far enough for independence. Marco protested at first, not wanting to be a burden, but Isabella insisted. Your family, she told him. Family takes care of each other. Even when that family failed you? Especially then. Having her father nearby changed the rhythm of their lives. Marco was still healing, still working through decades of damage, but he was present in a way he'd never been before. He played with his grandsons, teaching Alessandro simple card games and making the twins laugh with silly faces. He helped in Isabella's bookstore, organizing shelves with the meticulous attention of someone grateful to be useful. Thank you, he told Luca one evening while they watched the boys play, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. None of us get what we deserve, Luca said quietly. We get what we make of our second chances. You're making something good of yours. I'm trying. That's all I can do now. Keep trying. That's all any of us can do. The years unfolded with the messy beauty of family life. Alessandro started preschool, coming home with artwork and stories and a vocabulary that expanded daily. The twins grew into adventurous toddlers who turned every outing into an expedition and every bedtime into a negotiation. Isabella's bookstore became a community gathering place, hosting reading groups and author events and children's story hours where Alessandro loved to help. Luca's businesses continued to grow, but he remained present, coaching Alessandro's soccer team and volunteering at the twins' daycare. How do you do it? Isabella asked one chaotic Saturday morning while simultaneously feeding twins and helping Alessandro find his missing shoe. Balance everything? I don't balance. I prioritize. Luca appeared with the shoe, handing it to their oldest. Work is important, but you and the boys, you're essential. There's a difference. When did you get so wise? I have a good therapist and a better wife. Life wasn't perfect. Alessandro had nightmares sometimes. The twins fought over toys with the intensity of tiny warriors. Money was tight at the bookstore. Luca still had days where the weight of his past pressed down heavy. Isabella struggled with exhaustion and the constant demands of 3 young children, but they faced it together. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt, they faced it together. When Alessandro was 5 and starting kindergarten, he came home with questions about families and fathers and what people did for work. My friend Jacob says his dad is a doctor, Alessandro announced at dinner. And Emma's dad is a teacher. What do you do, Papa? Luca set down his fork carefully. He and Isabella had discussed this moment, planned for it, but actually facing his son's innocent curiosity felt different. I help companies protect their information, Luca said. I run a technology business. But what did you do before? Before? Miss Sarah said everyone has a before and an after. What was your before? Luca glanced at Isabella, who nodded slightly. They'd agreed to be honest with their children, age-appropriately honest. Before you were born, I made some bad choices. I worked in a business that wasn't always good or legal. I hurt people. He spoke carefully, watching Alessandro process this. But then I met your mama, And I realized I wanted to be a better person, so I changed. I stopped doing bad things and started doing good things instead. Alessandro considered this with 5-year-old seriousness. Like when I used to hit Marco and Dante, but now I use my words? Exactly like that. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them and try to be better. Okay. Alessandro returned to his dinner, the conversation apparently resolved in his mind. Can I have more chicken? Later, after the boys were in bed, Luca found Isabella in the kitchen. That went okay, right? I didn't traumatize him? You were perfect, honest but appropriate. She wrapped her arms around his waist. He's going to have more questions as he gets older. I know, and we'll answer them. Luca held her close. I won't hide from my past, but I won't let it define our future either. That's all we can do. Be honest, be present, be better. Be better, he repeated softly. That's the goal. The twins started preschool the following year, giving Isabella more time for the bookstore. The business was finally profitable, modestly but consistently. She expanded to include a coffee bar and comfortable seating, creating the kind of space she'd always dreamed of. I'm proud of you, Luca said at the grand reopening celebration. You built this from nothing. I had help. You funded it. I provided capital. You provided vision and passion and countless hours of work. He kissed her temple. This is yours, Cara. You earned it. Marco, her father, stood at the edge of the celebration, tears streaming down his weathered face. He'd been sober 3 years now, his health slowly improving, his relationship with Isabella healed enough that they could spend time together without the weight of the past crushing them. I'm so proud of you, Bella, he said when she found him. Look at everything you've built. The store, your family, this life. You did all this despite me. Not despite you, Papa. Because of you, in some ways. You taught me what not to do, what kind of parent not to be. She softened the words with a gentle touch to his arm. And you're teaching me now what change looks like, what redemption can mean. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. But you have it anyway. That's what love is. Giving people grace they haven't earned because you choose to see who they're becoming instead of who they were. Marco pulled her into a careful hug, his frail body shaking with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on me. Family doesn't give up. That's what you taught me, even in your worst moments. We stick together. The years continued their relentless march forward. Alessandro grew into a thoughtful, creative child who loved books and building things and taking care of his younger brothers. Marco and Dante developed their own interests, Marco gravitating toward music and art, Dante toward sports and outdoor adventures. We have 3 completely different kids, Isabella marveled one evening while watching them play. How did that happen? Good parenting, Luca suggested, or complete luck? I'll take either. Luca's last remaining connection to his criminal past came calling when Alessandro was 7. A man appeared at their door one evening, older, distinguished, wearing expensive clothes and an apologetic expression. Luca Moretti, the man said. I thought I'd never see you in the suburbs. Luca's expression hardened, his body positioning itself protectively between the stranger and his family. Vincent, what are you doing here? Checking on an old friend, making sure the rumors are true, that she really walked away. Vincent's eyes moved past Luca to Isabella and the boys visible through the window. I see they are. I'm done with that life, completely done. If you're here to pull me back in, I'm not. Vincent held up his hands peacefully. I'm here to tell you that the last of the old guard is gone. Everyone who knew you before, who might have had claims or grudges, they're dead or retired or forgotten. Your past is finally, truly past. Luca was very still. Why tell me this? Because you deserve to know. You earned your way out, Luca. You paid every debt, settled every score, and did it without burning bridges or making enemies. Vincent smiled slightly. You're free, really free. No one's coming after you. No one remembers enough to care. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for showing it was possible to change, to walk away. Vincent glanced past him again at the domestic scene inside. You built something good here. I hope you know how rare that is. I do. After Vincent left, Luca stood on the porch for a long time, staring at nothing. Isabella came out to join him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. You okay? He said, I'm free. That the past is really gone. Luca's voice was rough with emotion. I didn't think I'd ever hear those words. How does it feel? Terrifying, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or maybe it feels like closure, like you can finally stop looking over your shoulder. Luca turned to face her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I spent so many years running from who I was, and now I can finally just be who I've become. Who have you become? A father, a husband, a man who coaches Little League and attends PTA meetings and reads bedtime stories. A man who loves his family more than power or money or anything else. He cupped her face gently. A man who's grateful every single day that a frightened woman signed papers in a law office and gave him a reason to change. I wasn't that frightened. You were terrified, but you did it anyway. And somehow we turned obligation into love, contracts into family, darkness into this. He gestured at their home, their children playing inside, their life. How did we get so lucky? We made our own luck, through hard choices and harder work, and refusing to give up even when it would have been easier. They stood together on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Isabella thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that sterile law office to this warm home. From strangers bound by debt to partners bound by love. From fear to hope to something deeper and more lasting than either. When Alessandro was 10 and the twins were 8, Isabella's father passed away peacefully in his sleep. They found him in the cottage one morning, a photo of Isabella and his grandsons on the nightstand beside him, a slight smile on his face. The grief was complicated. Marco Marino had been far from a perfect father, but he'd tried in his final years to be better, to be present, to earn back some fraction of what he'd lost. He loved you, Luca told Isabella as they planned the funeral. In his own broken way, he loved you. I know, and I loved him, despite everything. She wiped at tears. Is that stupid, to love someone who hurt you so much? No, that's human. That's choosing grace over grudges. That's exactly what you taught me was possible. They buried Marco Marino on a crisp autumn day, surrounded by the family he'd nearly destroyed but ultimately helped build. Alessandro and the twins placed flowers on his casket, too young to fully understand but old enough to know their grandfather had loved them. Goodbye, Papa, Isabella whispered. Thank you for trying. Thank you for changing. Thank you for showing me that redemption is always possible. Life continued, as it always does, with its mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. Alessandro excelled in school, showing a gift for languages and debate. Marco, the child, discovered a talent for piano that filled their home with music. Dante became a star on his soccer team, his boundless energy finally finding a constructive outlet. The bookstore expanded again, and Isabella hired staff so she could spend more time with her growing children. Luca's businesses matured into stable, respectable enterprises that required less of his constant attention. They had time now, time for family dinners and weekend trips and the 1,000 small moments that build a life. When Alessandro was 13, he came to Luca with questions about his past. Not the sanitized version they'd told him as a child, but the real truth. I want to know who you were before, Alessandro said seriously. Before us. Before you changed. They sat together in Luca's office, and Luca told him everything. The violence, the territory wars, the choices that still haunted his dreams, the bodies and the blood and the darkness he'd thought was normal until he'd met Isabella. Alessandro listened without interruption, his young face grave. When Luca finished, the silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Finally, Alessandro spoke. Do you regret it? Who you were? Every day. But I can't change it. I can only be better now. You are better. You're the best dad I know. Alessandro met his father's eyes steadily. I'm not scared of who you were. I'm proud of who you became. Luca's throat closed with emotion. Thank you. That means more than you know. Can I ask you something else? Anything. If you hadn't met Mom, would you have changed anyway? Luca considered the question honestly. I don't know. Probably not. She gave me a reason to want to be better, but the work, the actual changing, that was on me. She just showed me it was possible. That's what I thought. Alessandro stood, looking older than his 13 years. I want to be like you. Not who you were, but who you are now. Someone who makes mistakes but learns from them. Someone who chooses to be better. You're already that person, Alessandro. You've been that person your whole life. When Isabella turned 35, Luca planned a surprise party that brought together everyone who mattered. The house overflowed with friends and family, the bookstore staff, the parents from their children's schools, Marco, Luca's second-in-command, who'd become Uncle Marco to the boys. "Speech!" someone called as they gathered for cake. Luca stood, pulling Isabella up beside him. 35 years ago, the universe decided to create the most stubborn, brave, compassionate woman I'd ever meet. 30 years ago, she walked into my life and changed absolutely everything. 8 years ago, she gave me our first son. 6 years ago, she gave me twins and nearly gave me a heart attack. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Isabella elbowed him gently. "But seriously," Luca continued, his voice softening, "Isabella, you took a broken man and showed him how to be whole. You took a life built on violence and helped me transform it into something good. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to wake up every morning and try to be better than I was the day before." He raised his glass. "To my wife, my partner, the woman who saved my life by agreeing to marry me. Happy birthday, Cara. Here's to many more." "To Isabella," the crowd echoed, and she stood there surrounded by love, overwhelmed by how far they'd come from that law office where a frightened young woman had signed papers to save her father. That night, after everyone had gone home and the boys were asleep, Isabella and Luca sat on their back porch watching the stars. "Thank you for today," she said, leaning against him. "Thank you for every day, for this life, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to. I never considered giving up. Even when you saw me covered in blood, even when you witnessed the violence, even then, because I saw past it to the man you were trying to become." She tilted her head to look at him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't agreed to marry you?" "Constantly. And then I thank whatever force in the universe put us together, because my life before you wasn't living. It was just existing in the spaces between violence. And now? Now I'm alive. Really, truly alive, because of you, because of our family." He pulled her closer. "I love you, Isabella Moretti. Thank you for seeing who I could be and loving me into becoming that person. I love you too. Thank you for being brave enough to change." They sat together under the stars, their children sleeping safe inside, their past finally settled, their future stretching out with possibility. From obligation to love, from darkness to light, from two broken people to one whole family. When Alessandro graduated high school years later, he gave a speech as valedictorian that brought his parents to tears. "My father once told me that people can change," Alessandro said, addressing the crowded auditorium, "that mistakes don't have to define us, that choosing to be better is always possible, even when it's hard. I've watched him live that truth my entire life. I've watched my mother build something beautiful from impossible circumstances. I've watched my family prove that love is stronger than fear, that hope is more powerful than darkness, that redemption is real." He looked directly at his parents in the front row. "Thank you for showing me that who we become matters more than who we were. That's the lesson I'm taking into the world." The twins, now 16 and impossibly tall, whooped from the audience. Luca gripped Isabella's hand tightly, his face wet with tears. "We did okay," he whispered. "We did better than okay. We did great." Alessandro went on to study international relations, planning to work in conflict resolution and peace building. "I want to help people find solutions without violence," he explained. "Show them there are better ways to resolve disputes than the ones Grandpa, both my grandpas actually, chose." Marco pursued music, his piano skills earning him a scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. Dante became a teacher, working with at-risk youth, using his own family's story to show kids that their circumstances didn't have to determine their future. "All three of them are doing exactly what I hoped," Luca said one evening after visiting Dante at his school. "Building something good. Making the world better." "They learned from the best," Isabella replied. "They learned from you. They learned from us. Together." On their 15th wedding anniversary, counting from the real ceremony, not the contract signing, Luca surprised Isabella with a trip to Italy. They walked through ancient streets and ate incredible food and talked about everything and nothing, free from the demands of parenting for the first time in years. "What do you want to do next?" Luca asked over wine in a Roman cafe. "The boys are grown or nearly grown. The bookstore runs itself. My businesses are stable. What's next for us?" Isabella considered the question. More of this. More of us. Maybe some traveling. Maybe mentoring young couples trying to build something from difficult circumstances. Maybe just enjoying being together without constantly being needed. That sounds perfect. Does it scare you? Not being needed as much? A little, but also, it feels like we earned this. The right to slow down and enjoy what we built. He reached across the table for her hand. "I'm looking forward to growing old with you, Isabella. To sitting on our porch and watching grandchildren play, and remembering how we got here. From a marriage contract to grandchildren, that's quite a journey." "The best journey." He brought her hand to his lips. "Thank you for taking it with me." Years later, when Isabella was 53 and Luca was 60, they sat on that porch he'd mentioned, watching Alessandro's daughter, their first grandchild, toddle around the yard while her parents watched nervously. "She looks like you did at that age," Isabella's mother-in-law said. They'd reconciled years earlier, the older woman returning from Italy to know her grandchildren. Same dark eyes. "Mom, same stubborn chin," Luca added, grinning as the baby planted herself firmly when Alessandro tried to redirect her. Isabella leaned back in her chair, contentment settling deep in her bones. This was everything she'd never let herself dream about when she was 28 and signing papers to save her father. This sprawling family, these grown children, this man beside her who'd transformed from stranger to soulmate. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, noticing her expression. "That I'd do it all again, every single moment. The fear, the uncertainty, even the hard parts. I'd do it all again to end up here." "Me too, though maybe with slightly less violence and terror." "Where's the fun in that?" He laughed, pulling her close. "I love you, Isabella Moretti. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for becoming someone worth saying yes to." They sat together as the sun set, watching their family, holding each other, grateful for the impossible journey that had brought them here. From a marriage meant to save a family to a family that saved them both. From obligation to love, from darkness to light, from two broken people to one beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life. Isabella thought about the young woman she'd been, terrified in that law office, signing away her freedom for her father's life. She thought she was giving up everything. Instead, she'd found everything she never knew she needed. "No regrets?" Luca asked quietly. "Not a single one. Not even when I was at my worst? Especially not then, because your worst showed me how extraordinary your best could be." She kissed him softly. "We made it, Luca. Against all odds, we made it. We did, and we're still making it every day." Their granddaughter squealed with delight at something, and Alessandro scooped her up, spinning her around while she giggled. The twins appeared with their partners, Marco bringing his boyfriend and Dante his wife. The yard filled with family, with love, with the evidence of lives well lived despite their complicated beginning. This was the happy ending Isabella had stopped believing in. Not perfect, they'd fought too hard and made too many mistakes for perfect, but real. True, earned through countless small choices to keep trying, keep loving, keep building something beautiful from broken pieces. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Luca stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me?" "There's no music." "We'll make our own." So they danced in their backyard, surrounded by family, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. The rhythm of a marriage that started as obligation and became devotion. Of two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to build toward the light. Of a love that proved redemption was possible, that change was real, that happy endings could grow from the most unlikely soil. "I love you," Isabella whispered against his chest. "I love you too. Always." And there in the gathering darkness, with their family around them and their future secure, they held each other and knew they'd found what they'd been searching for all along. Not a rescue, Not a debt paid, but a home, a family, a love that had survived everything and emerged stronger. They'd started with a contract, they'd built a life, and somewhere in between, they'd found forever. The end.